I think a couple people have come into the Zoom room. Don't think we'll have as many right now. Are you ready? All right, great. We have a busy night tonight, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the Larkspur City Council on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Tonight, we're doing a closed session first, and then we're going to have a special meeting with the library, with the Larkspur City Council and the library board. So I would have everybody welcome you back at that time, but let's begin with roll call. Here.
Here.
Scott Candell is absent tonight, and I know Vice Mayor Andre will be joining us. They're preparing our closed session Zoom in the other room, but she'll come back and she'll be in this session in a little bit. All right, we will adjourn for closed session and see you back here when we're done. 20 minutes, half an hour. It depends on how long it takes. Larkspur City Council. Oh, sorry, I have to start again. Welcome back. For the special meeting of the Larkspur City Council on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. We just had closed session and we don't have any reportable action, which brings us to our first part of our agenda is we reconvened. And do we need to do roll call again now that we have another council member join us? No? Okay. So we'll begin with a presentation. We have two presentations tonight, but the first one we have is the Marin, Sonoma, Mosquito, and Vector Control District Overview and Recap of 2024. And we have the General Manager, Peter, here with us tonight, and we also have Larkspur's representative, Gail Bloom. And if you would like to stand at the podium, that would be great.
Make some adjustments here. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. And I'll just check my perfect.
And just Peter, I just want to recognize that we have Vice Mayor Andre on Zoom right now, and Councilmember Candell is excused tonight.
Great. First off, I'd like to appreciate everybody for allowing me the time to come here. Again, my name is Peter Bonkrud. Thank you, Mayor, council members, staff. Start by introducing our board member. So Gail Bloom is your appointed representative from the city of Larkspur to our board, and it's much appreciated. We have a large board, but all of them come from a diverse background and bring a variety of perspectives to the work that we do. And it truly helps to have people with such solid governance backgrounds like Gail that can just bring their life experience and everything that they can to our district and our board actions. So thank you for that. I'm going to start a little bit just by introducing myself. I'm fairly new to the district, so I am the new district manager as of April of 2024. So almost have a full year under my belt here. I came to Marin, Sonoma by way of Shasta Mosquito and Vector Control, where I served as the district manager there for over 15 years. And I've been in mosquito and vector control for just around 25. Our district has been around for a long time. We're actually one of the first districts in California, started in the 1900s in San Rafael through a women's club that was basically trying to improve the area, make it so that it was habitable because there was so many mosquitoes coming off the salt marsh habitats that people just couldn't even exist. So a lot of the original efforts were actually in reducing the nuisance mosquitoes. And then once the malaria and mosquito cycle was identified a few years later, that became the focus of most of the districts as they were created subsequently after the first mosquito and vector control law was created in California. Then malaria was eradicated in California in the 20s, so good news there. But we've continued to work on a variety of emerging diseases, West Nile virus being our main focus today. But we'll talk about a few others that are still on our radar as well. In addition to that formation, we've now annexed all of Marin and Sonoma County. So we cover 2,300 square miles and just under 770,000 residents between the two counties. We're centered in Cotati, California, so a nice central location that allows us to get to all the way up to Cloverdale, Sea Ranch, and all the way down south to Sausalito. So it's a big area, but Cotati gives us a nice spot to get to all those areas from. Additionally, we have 36 full-time employees, and we bring on typically 6 to 8 seasonal employees every year, basically to help us with the additional time and work that's required over the summer. We have 24 trustees, 18 of those are currently filled. So we're always looking for some additional interested parties that want to come to our district monthly and talk a little bit about mosquitoes and entomological things. We're still looking for vacancies. Actually, Roanoke Park just got filled, but San Anselmo, Ross, Sebastopol just got filled, Marin County at large, and Sonoma County at large. And then our budget hovers between 11 and 12 million, depending on capital. What do we do? So we have a variety of services. Obviously, mosquitoes in the title, and so mosquito control is basically the primary focus of our efforts. Basically, trying to reduce those numbers below healthful levels, trying to reduce mosquito-borne diseases from being transmitted. In addition, part of those control strategies include mosquito fish or biological control. Education, getting out and speaking to communities, to schools, just like what we're doing today, trying to educate them on ways that they can help prevent mosquito bites, mosquito breeding, things around their yard that they can do to reduce those potential mosquito breeding habitats. Basically trying to leverage the people out in the public to help us because it's a large area, and trying to get out to all those different backyards. We definitely require the residents' help. In addition to that, we'll also do ground nesting yellow jacket control. And surveillance for adult mosquitoes, ticks, and also do and any additional pathogens that are transmitted. And then we also do rodent consultation. We'll talk a little bit more about that on subsequent slides. Okay, we follow what's called integrated vector management. If you've ever been in agriculture, you might have heard integrated pest management, and it's a very similar idea, which is basically we have this toolbox, and this toolbox carries with it a variety of different control strategies, and each individual situation calls for a different set of tools. So we bring in that data drives our decision making, that data decides which tools we use for each specific situation. And so a lot of times people ask us, well, can't if this then this type of situation for any kind of mosquito control strategy? And the reality is no, that each one is handled independently. Basically, we take that data in, we analyze that data, and then we make a control recommendation or strategy based on, or intervention based on whatever information we're getting. A lot of things fall within that IVM umbrella, but some of the things that we definitely utilize all the time is public education, our surveillance, prevention or source reduction, biological control organisms, which for us is mosquito fish, physical control, which is actually reducing those breeding habitats or making water move better, and then also chemical control. What do we focus on? So out of the 23 mosquito species in our area, actually only about a half a dozen are a disease risk. For most of you, the mosquito is the last one you swatted, but there is actually a variety of different species in our area. We focus mostly on the Culex tarsalis and another species called Culex pipiens. And the reason we focus on those is because they transmit West Nile virus. So our focus is on those mosquitoes that are a public health risk or threat to our residents. There are a variety of other mosquitoes, and I'll talk a little bit about two specific ones later on, but just know that that Culex genera of mosquitoes are the ones that we're focused on most of the time. And how do we do it? Well, we have over 25,000 different locations mapped throughout both Marin and Sonoma County, and they get inspected regularly. So anywhere from every 7 to 10 days to every 3 to 4 months, depending on the type of habitat. But all those different locations are being inspected, seeing if there is a presence or absence of water, testing that water to see if it has immature mosquitoes in it. And then if it does have mosquitoes, we'll find a control strategy that is compatible with the environment that we found those mosquitoes in. Quick little by the numbers for 2024. So we had just under 6,200 service requests split almost equally between Marin and Sonoma County. We removed 2,500 yellow jacket nests. We did around 500 rodent inspections, responded to 2,800 mosquito service requests, and also delivered just around 500 different properties for mosquito fish. One of the things that we're really proud of is our education specialist made it to almost 300 schools this year, covering almost 7,000 students. So we have that education specialist that's available to all the teachers in both Marin and Sonoma County. We'll come out and we have a variety of different curricula for mosquitoes, ticks, yellow jackets, a variety of ages as well, all the way from 1st grade to 6th grade.
Peter, I don't think I properly set you up for why you're giving this presentation tonight, because I see a lot of confused faces. But one thing people need to know is if you look at your property tax bill, we're all paying for this service in your property tax bill. Every single property owner is. And you'll probably get to it. I don't know that the dollar amount now, but you are every year paying for this service, and this service is available to every resident. And it's one of the agencies that we pay for as taxpayers, that we also have a Larkspur person, Gail, who represents us on that board. So so for the confused faces, this is I wanted everybody to know that this is an agency that's available for all of us.
If I can chime in, it's about $12 for the median house per year.
Yeah, but everybody's paying for it.
Appreciate
So-
that, Councilman.
Yeah.
And yes, it does vary kind of depending on exactly where you live, but
Right.
anywhere from 12 to around $20 per parcel or per property. And yeah, 100%. We want people to know
Yeah.
where their taxpayer money is going and the services that they've already paid for, so they can avail themselves of the variety of services that we have to offer. So
Exactly.
I
And
appreciate that.
and I'll often tell people who tell me they have this rat problem or something, I'm like, well, you're paying for a service that will help you deal with this. And it's really important that we get that information out. So thank you.
And I'll just use the opportunity to plug our website and our phone number, 707-285-2200 or msmosquito.org. You can go there. You can fill out a service request 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and a technician will come out to help you with your mosquito or vector control issue.
So when that one's waking me up at 3 a.m, zooming around on the ceiling.
We try to be a little quieter than that, but yes, basically, if you see us out late at night, early in the morning, that's because we're trying to match the peak times of mosquito activity.
Oh, right.
So mosquitoes are out at dawn and dusk. So are our technicians. So yeah, buy them a cup of coffee because it's an early morning for them.
Thank you for letting me interrupt you.
No problem. 2024 had some fantastic news for both Marin and Sonoma County, which is that we had 0 West Nile virus incidences, which is fantastic. So it's been a few years since we had 0. I'd like to say that it was all because of the efforts that we provide for Marin and Sonoma County, and we'll take a little bit of that credit. But overall, on the state level, we did see a reduction in West Nile virus across the state. So there are some just natural ebbs and flows within the disease ecology. And so some years are going to be bigger West Nile virus years for a variety of different reasons, and some years are going to be lower. But in general, a fantastic year for Marin and Sonoma County. I'm going to talk about the local transmitted dengue cases in Southern California, just in the case of some emerging and new issues that we need to be aware of in 2025 and beyond. So I'll hold on to that one. In addition to our area, we still saw 124 cases of West Nile virus statewide, and unfortunately 12 of those still were fatalities. Good news on the St. Louis encephalitis side, which is we saw 0 human cases. So we're seeing a reduction in St. Louis encephalitis as well, which a lot of people might be surprised to know that St. Louis encephalitis is something they need to be worried about in California. But West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis, and Western equine encephalomyelitis are kind of the 3 main diseases that we track regularly in California for mosquitoes.
Sorry,
Ticks.
Peter, can I just interrupt real quick? I think when you said 0 cases, that's human cases, right?
That's correct. And
But like
actually,
in-
in Marin and Sonoma, 0 incidences. We didn't see any in birds, and we didn't see any in our mosquito
Okay, thank
samples
you.
as well. Yeah. So it was truly a 0-out year, which is pretty unusual. Normally, it will at least find them in our adult mosquitoes or potentially in a dead bird that we use for surveillance. But this year, we didn't find any. So. For ticks, we do tick surveillance, largely focused on the Western black-legged tick, Ixodes pacificus. The reason we're focused on that tick is it's the one that transmits Lyme disease in our area. And so we're monitoring those populations, identifying whether their populations are going up and down, and identifying also within that the level of infection within those ticks. We have actually some positive news in California, which is that in comparison to the Midwest or to the East Coast, our infection rates are actually fairly low in our ticks. And that's because there's some interesting biology between the lizards in our area and the ticks. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to our website. But pretty exciting, interesting information about how the fence lizards will actually reduce the infection rate in ticks. This is your biggest concern. That tiny, tiny, tiny thing is a nymphal tick. The highest risk, and part of the reason is because of the size. You normally will notice an adult tick, even if it takes you a while to find it and take it off. They're large enough to see with your eye. Nymphal ticks, you got to have pretty good eyes. It's about the size of a sesame seed. So it's much more likely you'll have enough time to get attached before you'll find it. And they haven't fed on that lizard yet. So the fun little Borrelia sidle, or the ability for that tick to lose the Lyme disease based on feeding on the lizard hasn't happened yet. So if you're ever in the area, our nymphal tick peak is between April and about July. for this species specifically. And it's basically anywhere that you're going to be out and about near riparian areas or rivers or creeks or streams where there's a higher level of humidity and emergent vegetation. Make sure you do your tick checks. Rodents. So we don't do rodent trapping or rodent control. So that's something we always like to explain. But what we do is we come out to those areas and we'll identify the rodent issues. We'll find the harborage areas. We'll find those areas where the rodents are coming into your property. We'll help you with exclusion, and we'll give you this report that then you can either leverage to do your own control if you're minded to do that yourself, or hire out to a commercial pest control operator to do that rodent control. But we found that if you don't do the exclusion work, if you don't do the work that reduces those rodents, doesn't matter how much trapping you do, you're going to consistently find more and new animals moving into those niches that have then been opened up by the rodent trapping or rodent baiting. So it's really important that you do this exclusion step. And that's why I think it's really helpful that our staff will come out as part of your taxpayer money, and we'll do this work for you and give you information that you can then use to leverage for future rodent issues. Yellow jackets, so in-ground yellow jackets. You don't need to know what's in ground, what's in wall, what's anything. If you have a yellow jacket issue, call us and we'll triage that call and figure out whether it's something we're licensed to remove or not. And specifically, we're only licensed to deal with these in-ground nests. But like I said, you as the public don't need to figure out whether your yellow jacket problem is an in-ground one or not. We'll ask a series of questions, or we'll send a technician out and identify whether it's one that's appropriate for us to remove. And then if it is, we can. Public outreach, exactly what we're doing here today. So basically trying to get the message out, how you can help yourselves, how we can help you, how you can protect yourself from mosquito bites or tick bites, really trying to get that public health information out as widely as possible to as many people as possible, and specifically to those that are of higher risk, so that we can encourage them to take reasonable precautions for prevention of mosquito and vector-borne diseases. Okay, I wanted to touch on this real quickly, but we have two mosquito species that moved into California in about 2011, and this big red line up the state here is the concern. So they started in El Monte and actually the East LA area in LA County in 2011, and they're all the way up in Shasta County now. So it took about a decade for them to move up California. And why is that a concern? Well, these two mosquito species, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, transmits three diseases, actually more than that, but three that we're concerned about that don't currently, well, I used to be able to say that used to not currently be around in California: dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever. Now we've had locally transmitted cases of dengue in LA County. Both last year we had 3 cases, and this year we had 12, some in LA, and actually I think there was 2 in San Diego. We're worried the same strip of expansion is going to happen with the diseases, the same that it happened with the mosquitoes. So the concern is that if we get Aedes aegypti or Aedes albopictus, then we also have a much higher risk for dengue transmission, chikungunya transmission, yellow fever transmission. And one of the reasons why is mosquitoes in the West Nile virus cycle. It's a mosquito bird disease, and humans just kind of get in the way. For dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever, it's a mosquito human disease. So we actually serve as the transporter, the carrier of those diseases. And if we get bit by one of these mosquitoes that can vector them, then we can locally transmit that disease in our area. And that's what we're seeing right now in Southern California. Here's the good news. We don't currently have Aedes aegypti or Aedes albopictus in either Marin or Sonoma County, and we're running surveillance to try to prevent that. We'll throw a quick little asterisk on that, which is that they've now been found in Solano, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, basically all around us, everywhere except for Marin and Sonoma. Actually, Napa's getting away right now at this point as well. But it's something that we're very concerned about because it's a completely different type of mosquito control than what we're used to for West Nile virus. It's a backyard mosquito. It lives in and around you. It doesn't require much more water than a bottle cap that's got 3 days worth of water. So very challenging to try to control. How are we doing that? So we have a lot of different things. As a small district, we like to innovate. We like to try to leverage technology. So one of the things I'm going to highlight is our 3D printed trap. So our lab director, Dr. Fury, has been working on basically making tools for us. So as a niche industry, it's actually challenging to find all the tools that we need to do the work that we do. And the markets that exist come and go because of that. There's just not a lot of money. So being able to make our own tools has been a real game changer for us. So with the advent of 3D printing, us being able to, whatever we can imagine, we can build and create has been really helpful. So right now, Dr. Fury has been making mosquito traps for surveillance that are less than half the price of buying them off the market. Plus they function better and they test as well, if not better than what we could buy over the counter.
Are
Then the
those
other,
available for residents to ask for some?
so those traps are just for surveillance.
Oh.
They're not going to be for control. There
Okay.
are control traps, but typically we don't have those available to people because trapping out as a control technique is a little challenging. So if you're having adult mosquito problems, the best thing to do is just call us and we'll figure out what best strategy to deal with. Then the other techniques are all what's called sterile insect techniques. And actually, two of those have already been tested in California. Wolbachia was tested in the Fresno area, partnering with Google or Verily. Releasing male mosquitoes that no longer can mate or no longer have viable young out in the field. And then the other one, the irradiation, is currently being tested in Southern California. So Riverside County, Orange County, and LA County are all working to basically do these again, male sterile releases that would then prevent those mosquitoes from having viable young and ultimately would reduce those populations. So those techniques are being tested, being checked for efficacy as well as environmental compatibility. And there's some opportunity there for good control strategies moving forward that are different than what we've experienced or had available to us in the past. So I tried to go as fast as I can. Hopefully I left time for any questions. And as always, you can always go to our website, call us if you have questions beyond what I've discussed here.
As questions, is there, Gail, as our representative, anything you want to add? Come up to the microphone, please.
I didn't realize how much time would be devoted to bug love and interrupting that. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to say from personal experience, having someone with a flashlight wandering around the foundation of my house looking for rodent entry places was fascinating, and it only costs me time and money to close everything up.
Great.
And totally worthwhile.
Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions of Peter?
Yeah, just a quick one. Sorry, first of all, thank you. That was very informative. Mostly just wondering about partnerships, because we just like our fire prevention, we're looking at all sorts of ways. So, the Mosquito and Vector Control Association of California, the one TAM, the county parks, how do you guys work together? How do you get more efficiency, to reduce costs and more bang for the buck?
I mean, there's a variety of ways. So MVCAC is one that you already mentioned. So the Mosquito and Vector Control Association of California is our state association. We've been a part of that since its inception. I've been the president of that association. And it's a great place for us to network with other mosquito districts, kind of build strategies and discuss issues. We also have a Bay Area region that we meet with regularly. So that includes Contra Costa, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Napa, Alameda, and Monterey. And we meet regularly, typically every few months, to just chat about issues that we're all facing and that we could deal with. We also have a mutual aid agreement with mosquito districts in our area. If there were ever an emergency that would require, services beyond what we could provide. And then both through the county and through the state, we engage in a variety of different land use agency groups, whether it's CDFW or I'm throwing acronyms, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're always constantly trying to find, normally on the source reduction side, partnerships with cities where we can get in early and work with the design of a project and hopefully prevent it from ever breeding mosquitoes in the future. Because a lot of what we deal with is old infrastructure, things that were built without any real mind to mosquito and vector control. And so wherever we can kind of leverage those people that are building these projects or doing these renovations and get our input in that can help reduce kind of the work that we need to do in the future. So we constantly are working on state legislation and advocacy as well. And then I'm also actually the regional director for the American Mosquito Control Association, which is similar to the state one, but obviously on the federal level. And we do a lot of the same things. So right now we're working on the Monarch comment. I saw a flyer downstairs for the Gardeners Club, basically ways that we can partner with pollinator groups to help prevent the loss of pollinators, but also make sure that public health is being maintained. So right now we're working on with Xerxes and a couple other groups that are pushing the federal listing of Monarch to make sure that we can do parallel paths with both efforts.
Okay, one last question. Are you fully funded by our property tax?
That's correct.
So federal funding, whatever happens at that level will not affect your work?
Outside of some hit or miss grants that come through, like
Yeah.
there was some grants for Zika virus, there were some grants for West Nile virus. Those were largely federal. But no, we don't currently have any pending federal grants that, we could see a change in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no further questions by the council. Are there anybody in the audience interested in asking a question about the mosquito vector control policy? Okay, anybody online with their hand raised? All right, well, thank you very much for
Appreciate
that.
it. Thank you so much
And
for your time.
everybody, remember that you can call these guys if you've got a mosquito infection, invasion.
We'll take them both. But just if you Google Marin Mosquito, you'll find us. And we're always happy to respond to questions or provide service where we can.
Great. Okay, that adjourns our special meeting at this point. Now we're going to reconvene for a second special joint meeting with the library board. So I'd like to invite the library board to sit at the desk at the table with us, and we're going to come down there and we can all sit together. Oh. Thank you. Thank you very much. So welcome. This is fantastic because last year we started the process of having the city council and our boards and commissions meet and try to talk to each other and have the community all see us together. We started it last year again when Scott Candell was mayor, and we're going to follow through and this year meet the rest of everybody. And we'll start, so we have to do this formally. We'll start with a roll call.
Councilmember Andre, some of the mics may not be able to hear me.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Present.
You have to speak into these mics so that our gentleman in the back can hear, and he will wave at me if nobody's hearing you. So.
Councilmember Margulies,
Here.
Councilmember Paulson,
Here.
Mayor Way,
Here.
Library Board Member Ahern. Here. Board Member Fetterman,
Here.
Board Member Gunderson,
Here.
Board Member Shambroom, and Chair Rebel.
Here.
Great. So first of all, thank you all for being here. And some of you, I haven't seen Jeff in a while since back in the day, the first go round of the library motion when we were on that board, but it's great. And I really, really appreciate, and I speak for all of us, you volunteering to do this really important public service. Oh, we didn't say Damon's name. Did you introduce yourself?
Here.
We didn't introduce the rest of the people at the table. We have Damon Hill, who's the library director, and we have our city manager, Dan Schwartz, and our city attorney, Sky Woodruff. So they are all here at the table with us. But thank you, first of all, very much for doing this very important role. And I know some of you, like Jeff and Armel, and I think Andy, have been involved with the library for a very long time, seen a lot of coming and goings and seen some ups and downs. I was reflecting today about it because we're in IJ, and in fact, I went to a breakfast meeting where the city administrator, Derek Johnson, spoke yesterday, and he announced that the Marin County Library has seen 1 million checkouts on the online system. And an online system and the physical system are both ways in which our community accesses our library. And I think it speaks highly of what our community is interested in, is still having a viable, accessible and engaging library and library programming. So 1 million hits this year, or in this time and space in which they've had this online program. So, and we have it here in our library too. So we're all part of that system. So I want to recognize that you all submitted a letter, which is great. It's in the public packet for those who are interested. outlining what the Board of Trustees has done in the last year. And I would love to turn it over to, is it going to be Armel who discusses anything? To review the accomplishments, which you indicated in the letter, and then some discussion topics, and then future discussion topics. Did I catch? I will give you this if you.
No, I can do it.
You
Is
got
this
it?
on?
All right.
Is this actually on though?
Yeah. Is it okay in the back? Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I can just kind of give you a little bit of highlights of the letter. You know, a couple things that we were really focused on this year was communication, partnering with all of the different support groups that we have that hopefully people are aware of. And then a lot of the different programming that has really been, I think, kind of a stalwart of our library, and Damon has really continued that. So from the programming side, you know, you're very heavy on the children's programming as well as the adult programming, but there has been a little bit of an increase in kind of more of the teen programming, and that's something that we're really looking to continue. Damon has actually an advisory board or
teens?
advisory group of teams, right,
Great.
that come in and help out, which has been, I think, really productive.
What sort of things are they more interested in?
Right now, a lot of them, like actually our craft and art type projects.
From a communication standpoint, I think the biggest thing that Damon, Library Director at Hill has done is started a newsletter. So we actually have an online newsletter that is being pushed to quite a few people in the public, just to kind of let you know what is going on if you're not visiting as much as others, and you don't see all the flyers. It's kind of a central point to kind of get in touch with what's happening at the library. So communication has been a focus.
And I'll just remind everybody, and I do this almost every meeting, Notify Me, which is on our main webpage. You can, an individual can sign up for those newsletters on our main city page under the Notify Me. I get them all the time, and everybody can. So you can get all these newsletters directly mailed to you.
Yeah, and kudos to the city. I think the idea kind of came from the city newsletter, and that was one of the things we discussed in our meetings was how productive that was. And so this has definitely been a very positive thing for the community in terms of the library newsletter. Lastly, and I would say kind of most importantly from where I sit on the board is just the partnership that we have with the various organizations. For those that aren't as familiar, we really work alongside three different organizations: the Friends of the Library, the Larkspur Library Foundation, and the Commons Foundation. All three of them have done things in the community to support our library, whether that's programming, whether that's donating to the library locker, whether that's raising, assets for a new library and community center. The partnership is really strong, and there's a lot of engagement through those organizations alongside us to the broad community. So lots to be proud of. And I think, the future is definitely bright for the library. And that's because of the partnership of the city, the Board of Trustees, and those three different groups. So I'll pause there.
Okay, I was looking at some of the other things, the new collection and format. There's the new collection and format, playaways, wonder, books, video games, and circulating telescopes. You can talk about that.
I turn that over to
Okay.
Library Director.
Good.
Damon, why don't you take the mic?
Take the mic.
Or-
I noticed the seed box and all the puzzles since I've been in the library lately.
Yeah, we've been trying to see what would be of interest to people, and we're fortunate being in Marin to see what other libraries do and what's popular. So we've added a video game collection. The Friends sponsored that. That's been really popular with tween kids. We've also added wonder books, which are talking picture books. So
Oh,
parents don't have to, we're getting a lot of feedback that some parents don't want to have any screen time. So the Wonder Book actually will talk to you as you go and read the picture book. Playaways are also another picture book format where it's hard and you just push a button, it reads the story for you. So it's good for family getaways or traveling. And again, because once you open your phone, it can be over.
Yeah.
And then also we got a grant for 2 circulating telescopes, and the library board has just been real helpful as a sounding board, and these collections have different policies.
Have they been used, the telescopes?
We haven't actually launched them yet. We just approved the policy, and we're probably March 1st is our goal.
Great. I know when we've had conversations about how our citizens, residents use the library, they often use it as a business center for using the copy machine, using the Wi-Fi for the internet. And I noticed today all of the tax forms that are out on that countertop. Do you find that it's still a lot of utilization as sort of a home office type of thing?
Yeah, and I think you saw it like last Wednesday, the power went out in
Yes,
Larkspur.
at my house too.
Oh, did it? We had people come, and I think that this is the 3rd time where people come in with their laptop because our network is up. And the lights are on, but you can't charge your laptop, but they want to do their office space there. That's kind of a positive example, but people are in there all the time with their laptop doing their work. We have a lot less copier use and printing. It's a lot of people with their laptop.
Yeah. You notice that also, and that's great.
And we have to really remember that the library, the concept of the library with books on shelves is, I don't want to say completely obsolete, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It is, we have to think of it as a information, education, and literacy center. So if this is what you think about, then the scope of the library becomes much richer. And everybody thinks, oh, I can do that. I can get Steve's. I can get information. I can get my tax form. We especially saw that during the pandemic, where a lot of people had to rely on local resources
Right.
to function. And that's when we had a policy to loan out those little laptops and the hotspots, because people who did not have internet at home could not get things done.
Right. Great. Well, that's all just really positive. One of the things we ask is, so because when we come into budget world in the next couple of months, there's never enough money, but if you all can have a conversation about where your budget is and whether there is feedback for us about some new budget concerns or new budget ideas, please get them to us. We start our budget cycle and budget conversation, and Damon will be presenting also. But as a board, whenever you have that conversation and are able to let us know what your budgetary needs are, we have that budget conversation as a council in the April, May months before our budget is due in June. So if there's certain projects, communication projects that you really feel would be viable, let us know like that. Yeah. So anything you want to add that we didn't cover?
Not much.
Okay.
It's, it really is an amazingly exciting time from somebody who's been on the library board for a while to see the changes and with the commons and
Yeah.
people coming together. And as Armel said, and as Andy said, the library does serve this function as this, kind of third space, this community space where people can gather and do lots of different things and share ideas and build that sense of community. And so, it's really exciting to see a new facility that's under the direction of the library and the city of Larkspur to, take that into the future. So it's very cool.
And we'll see an update shortly.
Yeah,
So
I'll make one more comment on that.
Sure.
too, If you don't mind, just because kind of building off of what Jeff and Armel both said, I think the last couple of years, kind of since COVID, Armel brought up a great point, is the library board of trustees is really focused on how do we get resources and different programming that isn't just walking into a library with physical books, whether that's delivering books or TED Talks up to the Tamalpais, or some of the things that Damon's brought that are actually like tangible things like telescopes that you can check out. that is kind of a continued push for us. To Armel's point, is it's more enrichment than just coming in and grabbing a book. There's a lot we can do, and so that's been a big focus. So
Yeah.
thank you all.
And you're meeting once a month or, yeah. So if that comes up in the next couple months, definitely put that on your agenda if you'd like. The last thing that you
If I
had
may
was,
say one thing.
Sure.
Regarding the meetings are public.
Yeah.
Everybody is welcome. And just as we said, it is a Larkspur public library. And if you have any desires, program ideas, just come, just let us know. We are always looking for other ways to provide those programs to any age or any interest group. And that is one of the things that we can't really imagine what everybody else would like. So don't hesitate, join us. We have a great meeting.
and to that point, I've noticed a lot of, and also you are interested in getting new programming, speakers and things. We've had master gardeners who've been local residents who've talked about tomatoes and talked about roses. And I mean, if you have a skill set and you're interested in presenting, the library board is always looking for ways that we can enhance the program. And hearing that you have so many teens that are interested, whatever I can do to get teens interested in some type of project would be fantastic. Last thing on the list was policies. Are there any library policies that we can help you with?
Well, I think we had this on here as like a possible future one, because we know with the new facility, there's gonna be it's a good opportunity to look at our current policies and which ones we're gonna do. At the state level, they passed the California Freedom to Read Act, which requires us to develop a collection development policy and have it approved by the state. So I'll be working with the library board and submitting that probably in March or April, and we'll have a discussion over that, that's our guiding document for what we buy and what we deselect and why we have the collection we do.
It's called Freedom to Read.
The Freedom to Read Act. So it was passed last year in California, and it requires part of it is requiring each library to submit and have their library collection development policy approved.
And would that be something that they work on and then it comes to council for approval, or a policy like that is just approved through the library board? Or I'm familiar with that.
So the library board's advisory, so policies go through the library board for vetting.
Okay.
And then if they're administrative level policies, then I sign off on them. This would be a council adoption. So I think it would
Good to
come
know.
to you for a blessing before it goes off to the state. And that also gives the public more
A public hearing.
opportunity. Most of the administrative ones have to do with sort of the challenges of operating a public facility. So.
Good to know. I'd be curious about that. I remember years ago that really realizing how many bilingual books were really important in our library, that we enhanced that policy. So always opportunities that way. Any questions? Stephanie, any question?
No, I just want to thank you guys. I'm so glad we're doing this, and I agree, Jeff, this is a really exciting time, and a lot of you have been with this for years and years, and it's good to hear all that's going on. I feel like I'm gonna go to the library this Saturday.
I was there this morning, this afternoon. Anyone in the audience, it's in the chambers have a question of the library board or us? Okay, anyone online have a question?
Listen for any raised hand.
Does Stephanie, is your hand raised? Okay. Go
I
ahead.
just have a comment. One, I subscribe to the library newsletter and I think it's wonderful. All the new programming that's going on. There's a lot that's going on in our new library. And thank you to the leadership of Damon and also the library board. I think it's really bringing our community together in different ways around, again, expanding and enriching the function of our library. Secondly, I just want people to know that we have so many online resources through the library. And I don't know if people actually know, but there are so many resources that people can access online. And I think that's something that I personally use a lot. But I mean, any periodical, magazine, newspaper, you can just borrow, and there's no time limit. There's no you don't have to wait in line. I mean, these are things that, if there's a magazine that you want to read or an article that you want to access, like it's all available through our library. And I think that's, I don't know. I just wanted to remind people that we have this really great resource, and that I'm very proud of our library, and I think that people should use it. And I'm really excited for all the new programming that is coming. I guess one thing that I would like to ask the board to maybe think about is, the amount of time that our teenagers spend reading has dropped dramatically. And I don't know what the solution is, but to the extent that we can create programming or activities, book clubs, I don't know what the solution is, but to get teens to read outside of class, they're already overscheduled and stretched. But I think it would be just such a great just so enriching for our teenagers if they could actually just read something else outside of what their regular, coursework requires. So anyways, I've spoken to Damon about this, and I know that he's got some great ideas, but I think it would be great just to see if we could, as a community, try and just, the outreach to our teenagers, I think would be really important.
Well, I think that's a really good segue to our second part of our meeting, which is Library at the Commons project update, because we actually are having a teen room in our in our new building. Because we honor that and recognize that teenagers are an important part of the community and really would like their own space. At this point in our current library format, we don't have space for them to be independent. So that's been factored in. Plus, with the new community rooms, which are large multi-purpose rooms, your craft projects and the interest that they have in doing activities will be enhanced. So if there are no further questions, why don't we do Library at the Commons project update, which is 2.2. And I think we have Director Skinner here. Public Works Director Skinner. And I think we have some of the team from the builders. And if you're having a hard time seeing, feel free to move to a different location or Stephanie, can you see that okay? Yeah, okay.
Okay, good evening. My name is Julian Skinner. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Larkspur. I'm here to present an update on our Library at the Commons project. I do have support with me tonight. We have our representatives from our construction management firm, Kitchell. Ignacio Ramirez is here.
Raise your hand.
And then from the architect design team, we have Tom Beal and we have Kosen from the landscape architect company, RHAA. So tonight I'm going to give a brief update on the overall schedule for the library. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the construction, what's going on out there today. Update you on some of the costs and some of the budget actions that we took previously and some of the change orders that we looked at. We'll talk a little bit about the changes to the site as a result of the last meeting, which have to do with the parking lot layout and some additional landscaping, and then talk a little bit about the public outreach and engagement that we're doing with this project. Here's just a brief history going back to last February when the City Council awarded a design build contract to Alton Construction with Nolan Tam as the architect. The project went through design review with the city's planning commission. And then after the design portion of the design build contract, those plans were submitted to the city's building department for review of the building permit. And the foundation permit has been issued and the building permit hopefully will be any day now. But we do have a foundation permit, which is the first part of the building permit that's been issued that's allowed us to start work. And then they mobilized in early January, starting to do some of the site work, some of the grading that's outside the purview of the building permit. So those are all the dates in red. And then now we're in that orange, which is construction, where we'll be for the next year or so. As the contract is set up now, the completion date for the project team is March 11th of 26. We have other things that need to be done, moving furniture in and commissioning and things like that. So we don't have a hard building open date, but we're hoping to wrap things up in March of next year. And as we get closer, we'll work out an actual opening and ribbon cutting dates. This is an overall schedule, very simplified. The team has put together a very detailed schedule that has wall by window and everything and when it's scheduled to go in. This is kind of wrapped up just to generally show folks when to expect certain things out on the site. So as you can see, starting at the left, we have Q1, which is what we're in now of this calendar year. We have site grading, utilities, and foundation work is all going on right now. And probably within about a month, you'll actually see vertical elements of the building. The walls and the roof will start to go up. And then they'll start working on the inside of the building, and there'll be windows and finishes. And then towards the end of summer, you'll see activity in the parking lot. And then as we get close to next winter, we'll start working on the landscaping in the fall and winter of next year through to finishing again sometime in March of next year. Couple of recent photos. This is what's going on at the moment. This is site grading and then utilities. So they've installed the sewer line off of Rose Lane. That's the picture on the right. That's in a deep trench. And then this is foundation work. So most of the activity as of late out there has been excavating for the building foundations. So these are a couple of feet deep and wide, and there's a lot of steel and rebar going in them right now. And then by the end of the month, there'll be concrete going in there to form the foundations for the building, and that'll be followed by the building slab or the floor of the building. This is a recap. There's not any new information in here, but we just did want to present the budget and remind folks that we've got a number of different projects that are making up the activities out on the site, and we have a number of different funds, including a library grant of over $5 million for the building, and then another $1 million grant for the site work. And then the Commons Foundation donations totaling almost $6 million with the last edition that we had. And then there's some other city funds in here, that's some general fund reserve and some interest on those grant funds and some Measure G funds that were programmed in for certain components of the project. Those numbers include the budget amendment. The last time we were before you, we had a number of enhancements we were looking at, and the council did adopt a budget amendment at that time. And so what I wanted to do quickly was just go over some of when we did that budget amendment and we presented a list of enhancements we were looking at. We provided budget numbers to generate that budget amendment. And so as the team has worked through the design and gathered some of the harder costs on some of these, we're able to come back with you and let you know where we're tracking on some of those. So the first column, the estimate is what we presented back in October of last year. And then if we firmed up a cost with the design build team, that's shown. If it's blank, it means we haven't got to the point yet where we finalized that cost. But most things are coming in somewhat close to what the estimates were. Some are a little over, some are a little under. The big one here was one of the bigger changes was the solar and the battery backup. And so this is one where Alderman provided as a budget number of about 300,000 that we hadn't fully vetted out yet, but we used that as a placeholder. They did go out to bid, and they went out to local solar companies, and through that competitive bid process, they were able to get a final number for that as about 253,000. So there's a bit of savings there versus the budget number we had. There's a bigger savings in the battery number because we were carrying a high estimate with the anticipation that we were going to have to expand the floor of the building basically to house the battery. So that's why we had a higher number for that. The team was able to find a battery that is able to be sited outside of the building, weatherproof and everything, and will give us the same functionality as one that would have been inside. But because we didn't want to take away any floor space and didn't want to pay for any more floor space and wall space to house a battery, we felt this was a good cost savings opportunity here to have an outdoor battery. So we were able to bring that one in quite a bit below the budget number that we had. And then most of these other ones are pretty close. The clerestory windows, those are the operable windows. Those we had just started talking about before we had the meeting. So that was a very high level estimate at the 60,000. So that's why that one's a little bit lower too, because that one has gone through the design. And then in addition, there's been a number of things that have come up that weren't part of the conversation back in October, but changes do happen throughout construction. And so we're monetizing these things as we go. The biggest is with looking at the solar and the battery. We're able to eliminate the gas generator that was part of the approved budget, and we've gone through with the team and we've negotiated a credit for not installing the gas generator anymore, and a couple of other items here. One has to do with the landscaping. As at the last meeting, we were looking at shifting the parking lot further away from the building. There was a request to see if we could have more public space closer to the building between the parking lot and the building. And so we said we would move forward with that. And so at that point, October, as you saw, we submitted plans for our building permit in November. So we had almost complete plans. And so there was a design fee component to shifting the parking lot and then designing the space. All of the utilities had to be redesigned. And so that's what this $61,000 cost is. The actual cost of shifting the parking lot and the increased space between the building and the parking lot and the additional length of utilities to get to the parking lot, that cost is about $48,000. So between the designing and the relocating the parking lot, it's ended up about $100,000 add to the project to complete that design revision. We also erected story poles on the site. It wasn't part of the RFP. They weren't required to, but we felt it would be good for the public to see the story poles as we worked through the planning commission process last year. And then one here, I threw it in, it's a zero cost, but just to demonstrate that we are working as a team. The architects had a vision for the bathroom and the vanity in the bathroom that was above and beyond what we had specified in the project documents that they needed. And they really thought it fit with the finishes and everything else in the building. They really thought it was important to upgrade the bathroom, this component of the bathroom. And so the team came to the table and said, we're just going to do it. City, we're not asking you to pay more. We just think it will be better for the project.
Thank you. I'll think of you as I wash my hands.
Yeah.
So all of those additional things with the credit for the gas generator, that's almost a wash versus where we were before. This is just kind of a rundown of the change order. So one of the things we look at on this project is we're tracking the costs as we go through. And so as you recall, this project had a contingency allowance as we started of $613,000, which is about 5 to 6% of what the construction cost is for the building. Typically, a construction contingency would be higher than that. It would be about 10%, but because we're doing design build, we're able to use a lower contingency allowance. And so I've listed out here some of the changes we talked about last time. So the first total line that you see here, kind of 4 lines down in bold, that's that first change order that includes all of those items that I noted before that we finalized the cost on. That's $631,000. There's another $405,000 of the items that we've been asked to move forward with that we don't have a firm cost on yet. So there's just over $1 million there of changes that we anticipate that we know of today. Take that $613,000 contingency allowance and then the amendment that you passed in October for just under $1 million shows that you have about $575,000 left. We anticipate that there's going to be another $250,000 or so of things, additional costs that are going to be associated with us moving forward. So the bottom line is we've got about $325,000 for unforeseen things that we don't know about today that may crop up before the end of the project.
Fundraising remains important.
So a little update on the landscaping. So as I mentioned, when we came back in October, there were 2 things regarding the landscaping that we discussed. One was shifting the parking lot south to create a little bit more space between the parking lot and the building. So that's been captured now. That's the $100,000 that you saw in the change order. The plans are moving forward with that change. The other was the additional habitat garden that's kind of on the periphery of the site. That has not progressed much since October because the team has really been focusing on the components of the building that are required to get the building permit. As you see, we're working out there with a foundation permit. The next step is to take things up from there, and we need the building permit for that. So the team's been working around the clock, getting everything in place so we can get the building permit issued. So discussions on the habitat garden, we'll have that for you with a subsequent
Okay.
update. This is the plan that shows that the parking lot has been shifted south. So this shows now where we landed with some green space between the parking lot and the library building. And then as far as public outreach goes, we are posting updates weekly to the Public Works page on the city's website. There's a page dedicated for the library project. So there's a small blurb about the work that's been taking place that week and what we project to take place the next week. We do have a job site camera that's mounted. This is at the intersection of Doherty and Rose, looking back across the site. That's the construction trailer in the foreground. This is somewhat live. It updates a live stream every 10 minutes. It takes a new shot, and that's posted on our website. So if you're out of town, out of the country, and want to know what's going on in the library project, you can get on our website and you can click on this link and it'll show you within 10 minutes what's going on. And then we plan to be in front of you probably once a quarter and just provide you with another update, let you know what's going on. I think that was the last slide. So if you can cue up the video. So after showing you a bunch of tables and numbers, I did want to share something with you that's a little more interesting to look at. So this is software that Kitchell have brought with them that they're implementing on this project. This is called QPix, and what this is our construction management team is walking around the site and they're taking photographs. And with this tool, they're able to look at the site and the current conditions and simultaneously look at what the finished building will be there. So they can look at where foundations are, and then I'll let you see. It'll show better than I can explain it. But this is basically the site, and they're walking around. They're taking video, and they're also taking a number of still photos. And here's where it gets different is it'll split screen, and on the right is the building model, and on the left is what's there now. So you can walk around the site, and the construction management team is able to look at trenches and certain parts of the building, and then they can directly look at the model and make sure everything's in sync. So for those of you that haven't seen the building model before, this is a 3D inside and outside model of the new library and the community space. And then they're using it as a tool to help them look for issues in the field that may crop up if something doesn't quite sync with the model, or they want to wonder why something is a certain way. You have construction plans and blueprints, but often a model, and you have a physical, a mock-up of what it's going to look like is a helpful tool.
Terrific.
So that's the end of my presentation. I'm available for any questions. And as I mentioned, we have some members of our team here, and there may be a member or two on line.
Great.
If anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much. This is fantastic. I mean, this is a project that this community has been working on for many, many years. And as Andy mentioned, it's a real collaboration between the city, the Commons Foundation, the library, Larkspur Library Board, and Larkspur Library Foundation, and everyone else who has been working hard to make this happen. We are going to celebrate the donation of the Commons Foundation and at a public meeting on March 19th. But tonight in our consent calendar, we are looking at the bylaws or the agreement that we've revised the agreement, and a $5 million donation will be coming through to the city for this project. And all of that could not have happened without the generosity of this community and all of us working hard to share this vision. And our city staff working more than triple overtime, trying to get this project up and running, because it's had its stops and starts. But it's well on its way now, and it has really been a collaboration. So, but saying that, it's not done yet. We still, as you saw, Julian talking about all the further enhancements that would be wonderful to be able to have. Costs of construction always tends to change. So we're always going to be considering having more people participate with us in all of this. So I'd like to begin with having anybody from the library board have a question of Director Skinner about the presentation. Okay. Any council member have a question?
I had a question. Thanks, Julian, for the presentation. I was just curious about the habitat garden. I know that that's tabled for a later time, but do we have an estimate or an idea of what that cost might be?
I think we may have thrown a very rough cost estimate in the staff report back in October. We have a baseline, which is, I believe, about 68,000, which is what the design build team built into their bid as an alternate, but that's a very bare bones. And so as we went through this process last fall, we had a number of groups in the community that are very interested in plants and habitats, and they said they would look to work with us and maybe have some teaching gardens. And so we haven't quite worked through exactly what the cost would be and what other public participation there may be, but more than $68,000 is all I know at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor, are you any more? Yes.
Go ahead if she has another one, that's fine.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was actually just gonna say I was thrilled to see some of the savings, right, from removing our gas generator. And also that you guys were able to identify a source for the battery outside and how much under cost it came in versus the estimate. So I just wanna reiterate my appreciation for all the efforts that were put into that, and that, you know, the design revisions that needed to take place were all covered based on the cost of the gas generator. So it's fantastic.
Stephanie, any questions?
No questions. I do want to, well, I have a couple of questions, sorry.
Go ahead.
But thank you for the presentation, Julian. And also thank you to the Alton team and the design team, Nolan Tam, for listening to our feedback at our last couple of meetings, and incorporating a lot of the feedback. My question is on the battery. So if it's going to be housed outdoor at some point, we had talked about potentially being able to add to the battery if we wanted to. So is that still possible with the setup and the types of battery that were chosen for the project?
Yeah, they're modular and they'll basically sit on a concrete pad and they will be screened. But we're looking at the site plan and the area, and we're going to make some accommodations that we could add on in the future. Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. And then the 3 additional dual EV chargers. Is this the bi-directional, or what was the dual EV charger? What, I'm not really, there's a $60,000 estimate there, but there's no number next to it. So are we going to have EV chargers, or are we just not adding the 3 additional here? I wasn't sure what this item was.
Yeah, no, there's definitely going to be 3 additional dual chargers. So the dual charger is not bi-directional. The dual means it's a single pedestal and it has 2 connections off of it. So 2 cars. So it goes in between 2 parking spaces, and 2 cars could each charge at the same time. Those are in the plan. They're on the plans, but they're one of the things where there's many vendors out there. And so the team is still looking to determine which model of charger we're going to use on the project. That's why there's no final cost presented, but that is going to be part of the project.
It might be good to also note, Julian, there may be rebates that will help us offset that cost, and we're in discussions with advisors from the county about what would be the best choice to offset some of that cost. And just a reminder, we dedicated 8 parking spaces to charging, but we're plumbing the entire parking lot. So when we reach our goal that everybody's in an EV, we'll be ready to accommodate that.
Okay, great. And so are we plumbing for the bi-directional on a couple of those spots, or?
Remember, the bi-directional, so we can charge the building down the road when that technology expands. So that's a connection in the building itself. So they're planning that so that it can be installed in a future date when the technology is more robust. Right now, the bi-directional technology that you heard about the town of Fairfax experimenting with is actually residential level technology. that they don't really have right now a product that's appropriate for this building. So we'll plumb, P-L-U-M-B it, so that that device can be attached when the technology is at the right level.
Okay, great. Yes, that was my question. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Terrific. Anybody in the audience want to ask about this project presentation? Yes, Dana. Hold on, Dana. So Julian, would you like to sit here and with us? Or then you can have a microphone while the community speaks at the other microphone?
If there's a free chair, I didn't know.
Yeah, there's a good chair.
Oh,
If you're up here, then we can record it, you know.
I know. I'm just curious, is there any water catchment systems that are being thought about for potential landscape watering or anything like that?
There's not any landscape catchment for reuse as watering. There's standard biofiltration that's required for stormwater, but none of it's being programmed to be reused on site for watering.
Any other audience questions? Yes, ma'am. We know you, but you need to say your name when you, so we have it for the record.
Laura Lovett, resident of Larkspur. I've probably done tens of thousands of hours worth of gardening for this city, so I'm counting on a lot for this new library parcel. In particular, the habitat section. I still have not gotten over the fact that you expanded the lawn. For what reason, I don't understand. Lawn is expensive to maintain. It is the most maintenance heavy thing you can put in. The RFP for the job requires native plants. That means you're not putting in Kentucky bluegrass. You are putting in something native, and that will use about half the water that Kentucky bluegrass does, but it will still not be low water. And then I'd like to know if all of you are on top of the implications of the Assembly Bill 1572, which requires all decorative turf to be removed from public buildings in the next 3 years. And so, yes, and it's going to apply to City Hall, it's going to apply to the library, every school, every public park. You will be doing a massive amount of re-landscaping, hopefully with native plants. We're going to try to help you do that, the California Native Plant Society, but it's going to make plants very hard to come by. So think early, and since you are planning this garden now, for heaven's sake, don't put in a whole bunch of lawn that you will then be told you have to take out in a couple of years. And we will be happy to design the habitat garden for you. We could easily do it for $68,000, or any part of that $100,000 that you wasted making the lawn bigger, which I still
Thank you, Laura.
can't imagine.
Yeah. Could in future meetings, maybe we learn more about that law? I've never heard that one about landscaping, so.
Are you asking for a general education, or are you asking for your staff's assessment of its application to this project? Because those are different things. So, and I don't think tonight's the night
No,
to go
not
into
tonight.
that
No,
detail.
in future meetings, maybe we can figure out the implications of what that means for a civic project.
Yeah.
But not tonight. We don't have the
Yes, that's
time.
what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
is think now before you put anything in the ground.
Any other questions from the audience members? Anybody online have their hand raised? Stephanie, you had a follow-up question?
Well, maybe Julian can clarify that the central area, the commons area, it really wasn't meant to be a lawn. I know it's drawn and it looks that way. But, you know, we specifically said no grass, and that we wanted it to be a gathering space, and that it could be landscaped in a way that did not require water intensive plantings like grass or lawn. So I don't know, Julian, if you could maybe clarify that, or if maybe someone from the design team could clarify.
Yeah,
Because I think Laura brought up a good point. I just wanted to, you know, get some clarification.
Yeah, there is some lawn in the project, which is at the west end of the building where the circular bench and the outdoor patio from the library is, and that's um, drought tolerant, excuse me, turf that the architect can probably give me the exact name of it. And again, for where we're at now, we're concentrating on the building permit requirement, which doesn't include all the details for the landscaping. So what we did as a team was we saw how far we could shift the parking lot and still make it functional, and have some general gathering space. As far as the building plans go and the site plan, it's shown as green. I think we have some benches, some landscaping, but it hasn't been fully vetted on what that space would be. And we understand that people will want to use it and gather there. So we'll be taking that into account as we do the final details on what that space is.
Okay, more to come. Anybody, any other further questions from the library board members? Great. So exciting. We've got a lot more to do on this project, and the more the merrier. So if you get a lot of people who are interested in participating, everybody's welcome to participate, especially when it comes to their financial participation. I know the Commons Foundation will be presenting a check to the city on March 19th, and also opportunities for naming rights and naming opportunities. So pass that along to friends and patriots. How's that? I have also asked that we get a kind of a regular update as sort of a line item on this. If there is information that we sort of bookmark the chance to give, because this is probably the biggest project that we've had as a community, like one that involves the community in probably 20 years, maybe even longer. I mean, we've done bridges, we've done roads, and that does involve a community, but this project is something that is so multi-dimensional for community participation that it would be fabulous if when we have updated information that we all get to hear it. So any other further questions? Thank you all for being here. We will adjourn to our regular meeting, special meeting number 2. Interesting evening for us tonight. So welcome back to special meeting number 2. We have finished our joint meeting with the library board, which was really terrific. So if you get a chance to watch that at a community member, please do. And the latest update on the library at the Commons project, and that will be online on the agenda if you're just joining us now. So special meeting number 2, Allison, roll call, please.
Councilmember Andre,
Present here.
Councilmember Margulies,
Here.
Councilmember Paulson,
Here.
Fairway.
Here, and Councilmember Candela is excused tonight. If you're able, could you stand and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 2 is public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to come to the podium and address the council on matters that are not on the agenda. And remember, since it's not an agendized item, we cannot have a lengthy conversation or discussion about it. Is there anyone in the audience, in the chambers, who would like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none. Allison, is there anyone online with their hand raised who would like to make a public comment?
Any raised hands from our Zoom audience members? And there's no public comment.
All right, thank you very much. I will close public comment, which brings us to item 3, presentation. And tonight we have our fire chief, Ruben Martin, who will give a wildfire hazard mitigation program update. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the council and esteemed members of the public joining us today. Thank you for having me this evening. With the recent wildfires that we've had in Southern California, it's been a great opportunity to remind and bring up to speed all of our community members and our new council members that are now on the dais of the efforts that are being done by Central Marin Fire with the support of the city of Larkspur and try to reduce our wildfire risk here within the county. Before we jump into the presentation, I just kind of wanted to give a quick background of where we are, how we got to where we are today. If you can recall, prior to 2017, life looked a little bit different for all of us in the sense of wildfires. Yes, they occurred throughout the state of California, but here in Marin, we kind of felt, I want to say, somewhat secure because most of the fires burning were
Elsewhere.
far away until in 2017 when we had the North Bay fires, which were just to the county north of us. And the only difference that I guess saved Marin that night was not having an ignition that occurred. If we would have had an ignition that night, we probably would have been in the same boat that Sonoma County was. So with that, the Marin Grand Jury, along with the Marin County Board of Supervisors, published 2 reports. One is lessons learned from the 2017 fires. And the other one was what can we do to, or which was the grand jury report on what had occurred in Sonoma County, and trying to figure out who in the county of Marin is ultimately responsible for all the aspects that are required within a wildfire incident. For example, evacuations, notifications, fuels management, fuels reduction. And we quickly found out that no one agency was charged to doing it all. And since then, all of the leaders within the county, what included city managers, town managers, fire department officials, and so forth, got together to try to come up with a new initiative, which was Measure C, which was passed by our voters in 2020, which created the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which generates about $21 million annually that goes towards a bunch of different or a number of different initiatives. For example, fuels management, evacuation notices, evacuation warning alerts, direct homeowner assistance in the method of grants, public education on what we can do to be better prepared, and then local fire prevention efforts. The program, or Measure C, was broken up into 3 major buckets, with 80% of the entire tax measure coming back to your local community. And of that 80%, it's then broken down into 3 buckets. 60% for core projects, which are for the entire zone. So for us, we are located in what's called the central zone, which includes all the municipalities from Fairfax all the way to Larkspur Landing, which is about 8 municipalities, I believe. And then, so the core funding goes to projects that benefit the entire area. We'll go into some of the projects that are being benefited with that. And then the other 2 buckets are both broken up evenly at 20% apiece. One that goes towards defensible space and home evaluations, and the other 20% that goes towards local mitigation projects where your local officials may find this one area isn't covered under a core project and necessarily doesn't fall under a defensible space bucket. So how do we now mitigate some of these fuels? And then we are able to utilize local funding for that. So here at Central Marin, we utilize the Measure C funding for local mitigation projects, defensible space, and home hardening evaluation and inspections. Corte Madera, prior to Measure C, had a Measure F that they use for disaster preparedness and fuels mitigation. The new measure that passed, Measure C, couldn't supplant any existing programs. So they had 150,000 that they utilized for fuels management. And so what they ended up doing was just transferring that into the fire department budget and allowing it to mix it into our Measure C funds for added funding for our Measure C projects and fuels mitigation projects. And then, of course, we do MWPA core projects. This next slide kind of shows you all the projects that we've been doing within the county. We at Central Marin run 7 programs, and within those 7 programs have 92 different projects that are actively going on, whether it's continued maintenance, new projects, and so forth. And so if we look at the 20% bucket that we get for defensible space, it's about 220,000 from Larkspur tax generated funds and about 220,000 from Port Madera generated funds. We pull those together so we can try to maximize the amount of defensible space and home evaluations we do within our zone. And then our local mitigation dollars are equal to that defensible space fund, which is about 222,000 for each agency contributes. MWPA core funds that we utilize for evacuation route improvements, which is basically removing fuel from the roadsides. So it makes it easier for our homeowners that are in the event that they have to evacuate. They're not confronted with a wall of vegetation that can eventually ignite and would turn into a wall of fire. And so out of those core funds, we utilize about 278,000 for that. And then about 900,000 goes into what is we call the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, which is a 38-mile fuel break, or what we call shaded fuel break, which is removing all the underbrush, dead material on the ground, and invasive species from anywhere from the back side of the property line of a home, anywhere between 150 up to 300 feet, depending on the topography. And think about this fuel break goes from the top of Ring Mountain and encompasses the Port Madera entire community along the open space border down into Larkspur, around through Water District property, all the way to Fairfax, turns a corner and then comes back on the other side of the ridge through Oak Manor, Sleepy Hollow, San Anselmo, and San Rafael. And then it ends right back on Highway 101. That project is approximately 70% complete. And we're very fortunate that aside from MWPA core funding, we also received a $3 million grant through CAL FIRE that went towards the planning phases of this project, which was initiated within the first 2 years of the program, when 21-22. So if you look at all of our programs tied together, there is approximately 2.9 or $2.29 million being invested back into our communities between Port Madera and Larkspur for fuels management and hazard reduction.
So before you go on, I think it's, since this is a huge part of it, 900,000, just a short primer on why a shaded fuel break is needed. I mean, in that it interrupts the flow of a fire, but is that coming up in your presentation?
Yeah, it'll come up later in the
Aw, man,
presentation.
okay.
You're ahead of the game, so if you hold on a second, I've got specific numbers that will actually, with data, will show you how much of a hazard reduction it does.
Okay,
And what the fuel break does, we're not clear cutting and it's not a
right.
full
I wanted
2 or
people to know
3
that.
lane wide swath of strip cutting that you would see along the highway or ridge tops in other communities. What we're doing is just removing the underbrush to allow for when the fire front approaches, will slow down because now there's less fuel to consume. So fire lengths and flame lengths will reduce, which will then allow firefighters the opportunity to go in there and start some suppression tactics because the fuel intensity has been reduced. Also, it gives our community members that extra time needed to get in the car and evacuate. So it does two things there. It may not stop the fire completely, but at least it'll slow it down to give us a fighting chance.
Thanks. I'm sure you'll get right to it
Yeah.
soon. I think the doors might be a little locked. Thank you. If they're done speaking out there, we can leave the door cracked because it's getting a little stuffy in here. Thank you. Thanks, Allison. Keep going.
So another one of our big bread and butter programs that we're very proud of is when the inception of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority started. The goal was a community wanting to say, we need 15, 20 inspectors to come into my community for 1 or 2 weeks to blanket our entire community. And we would like to go through MWPA and we will reimburse you based on those funds. That was the intent. The other goal was a community can decide to go at it alone with hiring full-time personnel. Typically it's 1 or 2, and they go out on a one-off basis on a carte blanche. You call me and I'll go out and do a personal inspection just on your home. Some communities have done that. We have chosen to partner with our neighbors. So we've got together with Ross Valley Fire Department, Kentfield Fire Department, Marin County Fire, excuse me, Ross Valley Fire Department, Southern Marin Fire, and then in 2025, San Rafael has seen the value of our program and wants to jump aboard. Our group has coined the program, the Marin Defensible Space Alliance, because it's all these agencies coming together, pulling our funds together into one pot, going through the Marin County Fire Department because they've got already an existing hiring pool of seasonal firefighters. So you're looking at 19, 20, 25-year-old young men and women wanting to get in the fire service. This is a door in, or we have an opportunity because this is a different type of person we're trying to hire, is we tend to hire much more older people. When I say older, it's more my age, which isn't that old, but more mature as opposed to your typical 20-year-old firefighters trying to get into the fire service. Because what we're looking at is these become educators as opposed to just young firemen pulling hose. They are educators, educating our community members of what the hazards are and what mitigation efforts they can take to reduce the hazard on their property. So through the Defensible Space Alliance, like I said, we blanket all of this core central zone, Southern Marin, which is Sausalito, Mill Valley, portions of West Marin. This past year, we conducted 17,312 inspections countywide. What does that mean for us here locally? Is we did approximately 15,000 inspections. 1,500, correct. Excuse me. Thank you. With 1,098 individual properties inspected. And so when you say 1,500 total inspections, there's several re-inspections of the same property based on what hazards were identified. With several hazards being identified, and here it shows it's close to 400 re-inspections. And then from those, some of those properties got a third inspection. And what we were noticing is once we had property homeowner engagement through our defensible space application, which is where our inspectors go out and document everything they cover, they'll leave a door hanger on your door with a code that will allow you to then access your report, which is very detailed, that explains in a priority red, yellow, and green of how to prioritize work on your property, whether it's vegetation management, suggestions of home hardening, or whatever else needs to get done to fix your property. And then here on the graph and the pie chart kind of shows what our inspection access was. For us, we utilize curtilage. Basically, we don't trespass onto people's properties without being invited. So we will go through a gate if it's unlocked to knock on the front door. Whatever we can see in open space in the front purview, or what we can see from the street, we can comment on. We do not go into people's side yards or backyards without permission. So a typical inspection, they'll knock on your door, introduce themselves, say what they're here for, ask if they could do an inspection on your property, and then go around and do an entire inspection.
What if you have a homeowner that says, you're welcome to come on my property, and if you stand on this ladder, you can look over into the next guy's land property?
That typically, it starts getting into a gray area.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's real gray area there. What we typically do when there's a homeowner that complains about a neighbor, we typically inspect the complainer's home first because we treat everyone the same.
Yeah.
So for example, if Mr. Smith called you to X Street or their neighbor next door, I would go, okay, well, I need to see your property too. Oh, and by the way, guess what? You need to take care of this, and I'll address the issue next door.
Got it.
One of the other things with our reinspection program that we did notice was our community members communicate with each other through Nextdoor. And one of the communications that was brought to our attention is that there was a community member out there stating, don't worry about your inspection. The fire department never does re-inspections. Don't do anything. Don't worry about it. Fortunately, that person ended up having an inspection 20 minutes later. So yes, we do inspections, and we do follow-up inspections. What we're doing now is our Fireside app, which collects a lot of the data where the hazards are located on your property, have teamed up with our fire behavior analytics side of the shop to then look at if a fire burns through here based on the hazards that we've identified, which homes are the most at risk based on the science. And so that's how we target where we're doing our secondary and third inspections, because that's where we figure that that's where our targeted hazard is, where if a fire starts in these general areas, that's where it's going to go. And then the next big portion of our programs is our vegetation management, which vegetation management is think about fuel. Every plant that you see out there, whether it's out in county open space, whether it's in your yard, whether it's in your neighbor's yard, we as a fire department look at it as fuel. Stuff that can burn. Everything burns when it gets to its ignition temperature, regardless of what species it is. So we now have to start looking at what species are less vulnerable to fire ignition. And so we tend to think those as more fire safe plants. But I couldn't tell you that there's any plant out there that is fire safe 100%. So with that said, we try to remove a lot of the invasive species, a lot of the tall grasses, a lot of the dead material that's fallen to the ground. Live mature trees are maintained, they're limbed up, their low hanging trees are removed. So in the event that there is a fire underneath them, we're keeping it out of their canopy. So that way it can try to prevent some of that fire from spreading. So here is just some data numbers of what we've done. This year we've done 141 acres, which is about 19% more than 20 and 21. We've done 6.6 miles of roadway, which is a 31% increase since 2021. We've done 44 cubic yards of material. So if you think about a cubic yard, think about a box that's 3 by 3 by 3 feet high. And that's a cubic yard. And then the total funding, 1.683 million, which is 100% up from 2021, because if you remember in 2020 is when the tax measure passed.
Yeah.
So that wasn't within our first original year's budgets. And so going into the MWPA's, the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. I'm really proud of this one because this was a brainchild of both our hazard mitigation specialist, Todd Lando, and myself sitting down one day going, we received a grant for fuels reduction for emergency route evacuations. And I'm going, wouldn't it be great if we could do a fuel break around our community? And he took that and ran with it and said, hey, I've got this idea. And ironically, where we felt that this fuel break needed to be, turned out under the science was pretty close of where those polygons need to be of fuel management. So here's a 38 mile fuel break that goes all the way around our community. And I'm hoping that it'll be complete in 2026. Like we said, it's about 70% complete. However, once we're done doing it, doesn't mean we're done taking care of it. Now it becomes the maintenance phase, which is important because what we've seen through the data that's been provided to us by MWPA is that if you do nothing, your chances of survivability that I've showed of reducing those flame lengths, reducing that fire intensity tends to reduce. Your risk tends to increase as the years progress as you do not do any maintenance. So for example, the Golden Gate Bridge gets painted. If you don't come back and paint it again, you're going to start rusting.
Right.
So it's that maintenance component of it.
Ruben, can I ask just 2 questions? One is, on the shape of it, can you say a little bit about, how it works? I mean, we're going to, fire's most likely going to be wind from the northeast, right? And is this, kind of a perimeter, or is it just blocking from that direction? Or is it like a double wall to help Mill Valley out? Or, what's the basic idea of how this thing's put
It's
together?
basically encompassing the city of Larkspur, the town of Corte Madera, to try to keep fire out of the community. So if there's
from 2 sides.
like, for example, if we always envision there's probably going to be a fire either somewhere in San Rafael that's going to burn up to the top of Bret Hart and throw embers across over Sir Francis Drake into the Kent Woodlands, or we're going to have a fire somewhere off of Sir Francis Drake or in the woodlands, in the Kent Woodlands, and that fire is going to burn through with a north wind with some intensity down through Baltimore Canyon, through King Mountain Open Space Preserve, down into the city of Larkspur, which will then go into the town of Corte Madera, which will then eventually dive into the city of Mill Valley. What we're trying to do is create a sidewall, so to speak. So if it's coming, it's at least skirting the side of the city versus burning the city straight on through our hillside communities.
So its main placement is areas of real steep gradient and high winds.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And I think that's really important for the community to know, because I frequently hear the concern that a fire will start on Mount Tam and come this direction, when most of the computer modeling and the vegetation modeling, et cetera, show the opposite. It's the east-west movement of the wind, and modeling shows that it's moving from the description that you just gave, which is north of us and northeast of us if there's a fire ignition there, and coming west rather than west to east.
That's correct. And
Yeah.
that's because we typically, if you start thinking of a diurnal wind pattern or your Diablo winds,
Yeah.
it's a high pressure weather system. Think about a giant cap or someone pushing down on the atmosphere, compressing all the molecules somewhere over either the Central Valley or the Great Basin. And though that air, when it gets pushed down, has to go somewhere. So it starts going from high pressure to low pressure. And it's typically coming out of the east or the north, pushing south and towards the west. So if a fire for us in our community is going to burn towards Mount Tam, what we're primarily concerned about are those turnaround days when we no longer have that normal or that Diablo wind pattern that is burning offshore. Now it turns
It's
around that next
switching,
day,
yeah.
now starts coming back onshore. So we're trying to protect it from both ends.
Thanks.
Okay. So this next picture, and I'll put on my glasses and hopefully I can read them. Oh, you know what? Let's go down. So here's our Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. And if you're able to read the little drop downs, it tells what happens within each community with the shaded fuel break. So for example, here within the city of Larkspur, our portion of the shaded fuel break will reduce flame lengths by 62%. It will reduce the rate of spread of a fire by 42%. It'll decrease the potential of a crown fire, which is the fire getting into the canopy and running from treetop to treetop to treetop, by 76%. And it'll increase the potential of suppression activities. An example, firefighters putting hose and water on the fire by 60%. So those are some pretty dramatic numbers for us, that this shaded fuel break allows us and protects our communities that much more, as opposed to if we did nothing. And so those are some pretty good numbers. Here's a couple pictures of some examples of the shaded fuel breaks that we've done. The left side, this is the top of the Corte Madera Ridge grade near Christmas Tree Hill. You can see on the left picture, you'll see all the overgrown vegetation. And on the right side, it's after treatment. So you can see the trees are still standing. The majority of the vegetation is there. We've just removed what we call a receptive fuel bed, or light flashy fuels, that if you think about a matchstick landing on, what is it going to ignite? And then in this next picture is looking down Summit. And this one's important because if you look at the left side, you can see how overgrown it is. On the right side, you wouldn't have never known without us doing the work, but there's a water tank up there at the very top. Plus, there's also communication cell towers up there that are important not only to Corte Madera, but to Larkspur, which our community and residents need for the emergency alerts and to be able to get all their information. So we felt that this was a priority area of infrastructure to protect. So we went up there and cleared it. Plus, at the end of this driveway, there's 3 homes. So now we've also improved the evacuation route of this home. Here's another one that we look at that a lot of us here in Larkspur are familiar with, is the Citron Bolt. We've kind of taken pride and ownership over this because we're trying different treatment methods, working with our partners at Marin County Open Space on what can we do treatment-wise that works best. We've tried goats. We've done cut the acacia, pilot and burn it. We've done drastic, massive controlled burns in the area. We've cut it back. We've masticated it. We've come in and with herbicide that Marin County Open Space uses and individually treating each stub of acacia. And let me tell you, it is resilient. And so this is one that we find that it's important because it's right in the middle of our community.
Yeah.
And it not only impacts if a fire starts here, which it has in the past, and it can easily travel on one of those northeast wind days down into the town of Corte Madera and into Madrone Canyon. So easily, this is an important part for us to keep this place as clean as we possibly can.
And about 5 years ago, we had an arsonist up there.
We did. And it was,
Yeah.
ironically, it was the first day I was your acting fire chief.
Oh, really? Okay.
Tell me, it made my heart drop.
Yeah, that individual went and did 3 other ignitions.
Yes, he
didn't
did a
they?
few here and then a few in Corte Madera.
Right. Yeah, crazy.
Yes. And so here's another program that's being offered. It's your chipper days. Many of you may get notices or emails through Fire Safe Marin and or MWPA regarding their chipper program. Before MWPA, every agency and or municipality offered a chipper day, i.e. the fire department sponsored or your public works sponsored in either the Nordstrom's gravel overflow lot or Piper Park, where you as a homeowner did the work, stuffed all the material into the trunk of your car and brought it over. And we did that. It was 1 day a week or 1 day a year. And it was about an 8-hour day. And yes, it was a feel good proposition. However, we weren't doing anything in reality. So when MWPA started and if originally it was Fire Safe Marin, but it got moved back into MWPA, we started looking at a different chipper program that where we can coincide with our defensible space inspections, that where we would come through first, tell you what needed to get done. They would then come back and instead of doing a parking lot chipper day, they would actually pick it up at about the size of 4 cubic yards within your property. So right on your driveway. So they would call up, you sign up for the chipper day. They're about 1 week, or we actually do 2 or 3 weeks a year within the city of Larkspur. Well, they'll come through on a one-off on these independent inspections. One of the other things we do is say you did the work and you call us and say, when is your chipper day? And we tell you, well, the chipper day isn't for another month and a half. And you go, oh, great. I've got this giant pile of debris in my yard, getting dry, becoming a fire hazard. What do I do? And we say, what's your address? Don't worry about it. We have crews in the area because we're doing fuels management. As you saw, it was those 92 projects we're doing. So we just call our contractor and said, on your way out of town, do me a favor, stop by at this address and pick up the brush. And they'll do that on these one-offs. So that's one added amenity that we do to our community members. The other thing is if a community comes together and they work together, we can set up special chipper days just for that community alone. And we've done it. And it's been an 8-hour day because the amount of fuel that they've taken off their hillside is tremendous. So anything we can do to help, we're doing it. And here's some of the numbers from 2021 to now of how many pickups were done in Larkspur. So we average about maybe 105 or so at its peak, with overall about 100 inspections or 100 pickups this last year. And when you think about it, the first year, 21, not that many people knew about it. As they found out, it spiked. And then now that people have utilized and removed a lot of the fuel, most of it can now fit into their green can. So you're starting to see a little bit of a drop.
Ruben, can I ask just 2 small questions? One is, with these rains, this is a common question. It seems like we'll have less fire, but it's really just creating more vegetation in the summer. How is that impacting, especially the atmospheric rivers of last year and the rains this year? And secondly, what's the overlap between the chipper program and the home inspections? So if you go to a home, and I know defensible space has various zone perimeters, but are you making recommendations which then tie into the chipper program, or?
So I'll address the chipper program first. Yes. So we work with MWPA closely to coincide our defensible space inspections with their chipper days. So we tell them we are in Larkspur first week of May. Schedule the chipper program 2 weeks after. And so we try to do it so that way it gives you, the homeowner, time to do the work, put it out, and then it'll come by and get picked up. So we try to give you a little bit of time to get the job done.
Okay, and then the rains are probably more in the public space, right? They're not,
Yeah, and so what we look at is, yes, rains are great for fire because it reduces or increases the fuel moisture within our larger fuels. So example, your trees. We start looking at like your large trees, we look at them as like 10,000 hour fuels. So it takes 10,000 hours of direct saturation of water for them to become 100% saturated with water. So it's going to take time. So every little water for me helps on the larger mature trees. What it does, it eventually will do, is it creates that grass crop. So we tend to have higher grasses. So on really, really wet years, we'll tend to see a lot of grass fires the following summer. And so that's where for us, it becomes a concern because now you have that receptive fuel bed that will be available and ready to burn as the summer months progress.
okay, thank you.
And then the slide on the right shows the amount of cubic yards that have been removed through the chipper program. And then, of course, MWPA offers grant programs. They've coincided their grant programs to tie in with our defensible space inspections. So for you to be eligible for a MWPA, either home hardening and or defensible space grant, you would have to have had an inspection done by one of either our Marin Defensible Space Alliance inspectors and or an inspector from one of the other surrounding
And
agencies.
their means tested.
Yes. And so we would then, and then it's a reimbursement when it comes to the grant. And according to the MWPA website, in 23-24, they allocated about 800,000 in resident grants. And then 1.6 total awarded. And when we say 1.6 total awarded, there's some municipalities or some zones that tend to get more funding. And it's just because they're the only municipality within that zone. For example, the central zone has every agency within the Ross Valley. San Rafael only has San Rafael. Novato only has Novato. Southern Marin has Southern Marin in Mill Valley. And so with Southern Marin and San Rafael, they look at the amount of funds that they have and try to figure out, can we spend this throughout this year through vegetation management and or defensible space inspections? How can, and if not, then how can we then return some either core funding or local funds back to MWPA to then augment your homeowner direct assistance grant programs? So that's where you see the difference between the 800,000 and the 1.6 million. What was actually awarded is because these other agencies put more money back into the resident grant program. For us, we are limited in funds, and the way we tend to utilize the best direct assistance that we found is by doing a voluntary abatement program. Meaning, I've gone to your property, we've inspected it, and we figured out that for some reason or another, the work's not getting done. Most of the time, it's finance related, because most of us here are dollar rich or property rich, dollar poor, don't have a lot of resources, functional needs, retired, elderly, and we go, okay, we know which properties those are in our communities. We're the ones that the eyesore that we walk by every day. And so those are the ones where we make contact with the property owners and say, if you allow us on your property, would you allow us with the Measure C funding to abate your property? We found that that is a lot more productive. It takes a lot less staff time, a lot less city time. Because what we've also done is our other tool in the toolbox is a court ordered abatement. And we've done a handful of those both here within the city of Larkspur and within our other jurisdiction. And it takes anywhere from 6 to 10 months to abate just one property going through the court system. And it's laborious, time consuming, and it costs about 3 times as much to go that route than it would be through a voluntary abatement. And let me tell you, the voluntary abatements are a very welcome sight to our community members. Continued challenges for us is, as you've seen, we've done 1,500 local defensible space inspections. We have access to the analytics within the defensible space application when we do your inspections. And within that, it'll tell us whether you've looked at your report. And so we've got about 70% homeowner engagement that they've, out of the 1,500 homes, 70% of them open the report. The problem we're having is the lack of homeowner action. Homeowners just are not doing the work. They're not doing what they need to do, not only to protect their homes, protect their neighborhoods, protect their communities, and maintain the insurance market within the state of California.
Do you think, Ruben, that is that they're not doing it, or they're not returning to the inspection report and uploading their evidence that they did the work?
To be honest, they're not doing it.
They're not doing
They're
it.
not doing it because
Yeah.
we'll go back and do follow-up inspections.
Okay.
Even the following year, and what was written down the previous year was still there.
Yeah, I was thinking because I got a violation that, or a suggestion that I remove a wooden fence, and we did, and put in a gated, a metal fence. And then I took a picture of it because that was what the report asked, but I had to upload that back into my report. So I can see some people not doing that secondary thing to prove that they had actually done
Right.
the mitigation.
So what I'm talking about, the lack of homeowner engagement, is not necessarily with the home hardening and recommendations, because those are recommendations on when you have the funds available. It isn't mandated by local ordinance.
Yeah,
What I'm talking about is vegetation management and defensible space.
yeah.
Is homeowners are not maintaining their properties as required. And that challenge becomes with us is how do you now go to that enforcement component when we, as I mentioned earlier, it can take 6 to 10 months to abate one single property. Now you start looking at about 4,500 homes within our community, both Larkspur and Corte Madera and Green Beret, that are within the WUI or Wildland Urban Interface, which are your hillsides. It's a challenge. Had a phone call today from an irate homeowner that was upset because their neighbor has failed to do anything over the last 2 years. So now that we know, that property is on our radar, and we're going to make sure it gets done. But unless that information gets back to us for the enforcement piece, that's why we go back to the worst cases to do these re-inspects. And that's when we start seeing more engagement. And that's when we start seeing that that's where we can start doing some voluntary abatements. And we've also told the inspectors that if they identify during the initial inspection any home that may fall into the purview of a voluntary abatement, let us know sooner rather than later. Because we'd rather address it early than wait, because as we know, as the season goes on, we get busier and busier and busier,
Yeah.
that it gets harder and harder and harder to follow up with these properties.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I thought it might be a good time to let folks who are interested in this topic know that the legislature is considering a bill that would shift this paradigm and start to make it a lot easier for fire departments to enforce vegetation management rules.
And the other part of it is what we call this Zone Zero, which is, if you have been listening to the news, is the executive order signed by Governor Newsom that then directed the Board of Forestry to then publish what are called the fire hazard severity zone maps, which will be published next week, as we're told. And along with that, so it's basically very high fire hazard severity zones are the highest, worst areas where fires could potentially happen, where we've had a history in the
It's all
past.
this.
It is for us, but believe it or not, Madam Mayor, there's only one parcel identified in the former state map within the city of Larkspur, and that is the parcel that goes the very end of Madrone that
Oh,
leads
yeah.
into
Wilson Way.
no, it leads into Dawn Falls, the trail.
Oh.
That is the only parcel in the state map that is on the very higher fire hazard severity zone map. So I anticipate those zones increasing. What does that mean for us as a community? I don't see much change because we're already enforcing building code standards and vegetation management standards within these hillside communities. One of the other things that they're going to be passing down is that through legislation is what's called the Zone Zero defensible space requirement, which is no vegetation or nothing combustible within the first 5 feet of your home and or decks, which is dramatically going to change the way our communities look and what that landscape looks like. So that will be coming down the pike. We will see what it does for us as a local community. So I see that as the biggest change within our hillsides is everything within that 5 foot zone.
And just to kind of tee up my council colleagues is that there's the collaboration among the county for all the fire chiefs to bring this forward to all of the cities to pass an ordinance that is uniform. So that we're all doing it, as opposed to just spotty, one community does and one doesn't. That's coming this year.
Yes,
So-
and so we're working with my colleagues from other agencies, and we will be bringing back a presentation to you later this year, once we have guidance from the state of what that looks like. And as Mayor Way had mentioned, is the goal is to have one ordinance that is collaboratively utilized throughout the entire county. So it makes it easier for our homeowners, and it validates the enforcement.
Mhm.
When you think about it, if we're all doing the same thing. One of the nice things, if I may say, is we as Central Marin Fire, through our Fire Prevention Bureau, have been enforcing Zone 0 on new construction and significantly substantially remodeled structures. So we started that right around 2019, 2020.
You're not doing it with resales, are you?
No, we're not.
Not
But with
yet?
Resales, we're being very aggressive with vegetation
I noticed that.
management, because that is when there's resources available to either the buyer or the seller that are released when you sell your home.
Mhm.
And then, of course, our continuing challenges I mentioned through enforcement. So here's our plan for 25, 26 is we've already started the 25, 26 work plan, which I met with Mayor Way earlier today regarding as her representation on MWPA. And it was discussing some of our programs, and we look at our program as defensible space home evaluations using the house out approach, evacuation route improvements, removing fuel on the evacuation routes. And then we're going to try to incorporate some evacuation drills. A lot of our community members from both Madrone Canyon and Christmas Tree Hill have been clamoring. So we'll put something together for them this year. Try to implement some lessons learned from Southern California, what we're getting back from them. And then the Zone 0 educational campaign that we will be bringing back to you in the near future. And then, so this is for our community members. And so how can you prepare? One is I want to remind our community members to sign up for their alerts through emergency.marincounty.gov or Alert Marin. Alert Marin will transfer you over to the Office of Emergency Management, where you can sign up for your alerts. Know your evacuation routes in and out of your home. Most of us that live in those one way in, one way out communities. It's easy to go. It's the way you go to the grocery store. It's the way you go to the bank. It's the way you drop your children off at school, how you go to work. That is your evacuation route. Those that are fortunate enough to have more than one way out of their community, make sure you know that. Make sure you know how to get out of them. Make sure you drive them so that you understand have things changed. Make sure you do your defensible space, fuel reduction around your home. Make sure you start looking at that Zone 0. We'll be coming to you back later this year with an ordinance, and then start considering some home hardening. And I think it's a combination of everything is what's going to keep our home safe. It's no one silver bullet. You can't just do, I'm going to replace my vents and windows, but you do nothing with the vegetation. It's a moot point. You do your vegetation, but you don't do anything else. That's a moot point, because then it's the ember cast. So it's a combination of everything that we need to do to try to harden our homes, make them more defendable, make them survive a wildfire if we have one come through this neighborhood. And most importantly, it allows us to keep our insurance market here in California. And with that, I'll answer any questions the council may have. And so this picture is of the 1929 Mill Valley Fire of firefighters running down the hill when they were, I believe, about to get overrun.
All right, thank you very much. I would also add that we have, I don't know how many in Larkspur, but Firewise communities, I know at least 3. So Firewise communities are a neighborhood directed and organized group that prepares for wildland fires and fire preparation in an individual neighborhood, and they're good resources too, not only for learning more, but also for organizing chipper days. All right, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chief Rubin. I have one question for you, and that's regarding the Zone Zero defensible space. Is that only applicable to residents that are in the WUI area? I mean, for example, I live in Cape Marin. And,
That wouldn't apply to you.
okay,
So it applies to homes that are within the hillside communities or the WUI, which
Okay.
is where we require defensible space,
right,
home hardening. However, I think every homeowner needs to look at, regardless of where you live, is make sure you don't have dead and dying combustible vegetation on or near your house. Aside from a wildfire, somebody walking by with a cigarette,
hmm
somebody with kids with matches, you name it. So I strongly suggest that everyone do something to maintain their properties. However, the Zone Zero is primarily for the homes within the hillside communities.
okay, thank you.
The other resource too for everyone is Fire Safe Marin's website. Is very collaborative with Marin Wildfire, but there's a whole drop-down menu of home hardening tips and ideas and resources that way. So, it just like you said, the resources are there. It's getting people to actually do the work is the hardest thing that we all face. So, any question?
Yeah, just a brief one. On the evacuation, so I think we had Zone Haven and there's the high-low systems, at least in Mill Valley. What's the latest on that? Because I think that's like the shaded fuel break. It's at some percentage of completion is my understanding.
So the Zone Haven maps are Zone Haven is a platform that's utilized by emergency managers that allow us to systematically evacuate a community. The biggest thing that homeowners need to know is what zone they live in, i.e. so you can go on to emergency.marincounty.gov and go onto the map there, and it'll identify what zone your home is in. So in the event that we send an alert out that tells you what zone you're in, that's the one, whether you're under an evacuation order, an evacuation warning, or you need to shelter in place. Those are 3 actionable items that will be sent out through Zone Haven and through Alert Marin. So the platform is there, and it is like we utilize it through our dispatch platforms that we have within our tablets, that the incident commander, for example, Ezra Coleman back there, if he shows up on a fire on our Zone Haven maps that he has here, he can quickly click the zones and it'll tell him an estimated population. So for example, I look at Marina Vista, Christmas Tree Hill, I've got about 1,000 people. So to me, I'm starting to do rough ball parks, which is about 330 to 400 cars. What am I going to do with all those cars? So for me and our emergency managers, we start planning ahead of time, working with our law enforcement partners and CNPA of what is our plan in the event of that evacuation. So those maps are done. I think the other part when you talked about the Genesis system, which is the LRAD, which Southern Marin has, which is the long-range acoustical devices. If you recall, I believe in 2019, they came in and did a test across the street with the big boom and sounded the siren. What we quickly found out is, yes, if you're here next to the fire station or city hall, you can hear it.
But you couldn't hear it anymore.
You move up Madrone Canyon, even to, I believe it's Echo or just the first circle there, you couldn't hear it because of the topography, the sound being muffled through the vegetation. So there's some challenges there. Now, my recommendation is if we're planning a evacuation siren system, the sirens need to be mounted on poles and situated in the middle of the community, meaning up in the hillsides. That is how you're going to get mass notification through an outdoor siren system. However, if you look at the history of outdoor siren systems, they were designed to notify people of danger outside for you to take shelter indoors. I.e. air raid shelter or air raid sirens, tornado siren, hurricanes, tsunamis. That's what they're intended for, not necessarily for wildfire. So we're kind of using them for something that they aren't necessarily designed for, but we're trying to utilize every tool we have in the toolbox. So for us, until we find something that we feel comfortable with that can notify the people that are most vulnerable, I think we're going to still look. And I believe the county or Office of Emergency Management just finished a feasibility study for outdoor sirens. So we want to get access to that to see what that study looks like and where is the recommended locations for these sirens.
Great. And the only other thing I wanted to just, I know it's a small crowd here, but thank you for, Chief Martin is at all or many of our volunteer meetings every month. And then the other thought is, I think all of this, MWPA preparation we're talking about is maybe 2% of what the fire department does. I mean, I think you guys are out there. Well, I mean, as far as suppression, you're suppressing small fires, and this is the big one but anyway, thanks for all that.
Great. Stephanie, any question? No?
I just have a quick comment for Chief Martin. Thank you for the presentation. It was extremely informative. I just have some comments that I've heard from homeowners and community members where you're absolutely correct. It's been a challenge, I think, trying to enforce the MWPA recommendations. And maybe when you come through with the ordinance, and everybody adopts it, or all those surrounding jurisdictions adopts it, maybe that will be easier for homeowners. But I think, part of what the struggle is it does cost money to implement some of these measures. And so while people may not qualify for grants, people just, it's low on the priority list. And so how do we encourage homeowners to get educated about, hey, if you did this, it would reduce the fire risk. And by the way, here are all the other things that the county is doing and that MWPA is doing, that are really trying to, harden our communities against fire. And I think, a lot of that is educational. And so how can we help homeowners really understand that? And then also you have the collective action problem, which is, hey, my neighbor so-and-so didn't do this, so why should I do this? And so I see a lot of that going around as well, where, it's so easy to point at someone else and say, look, what about this bamboo, this whole thing of bamboo over here, in my neighbor's yard? They haven't cut that down. Why should I, rip out the 5 feet of landscaping around my house? So I hear these comments a lot, and I try to tell people that, it's important that, you want your own home to be safe, or as safe as it can be if we ever have a wildfire. But obviously we are a community, and so it's not limited to what any one home can do, and that it's really a community-wide type of effort. So I don't know, it's a tough conundrum. Maybe when this ordinance comes through, and maybe with some of the state legislation that comes through about zone 0, maybe that will get people to start implementing some of the things that are being recommended by MWPA. But I do feel that in the first round of inspections, I felt that a lot of people did implement or tried to make changes. And it's in the second and third round of inspections where people are like, you know what, I've already done a lot of stuff, and now they're asking me to do more stuff. And I'm sensing that there's just a little bit more resistance this time around.
That's a challenge.
Mhm.
And we hear it every day. The same comments you hear, we hear the same. And it comes down to the education. I feel that the only avenue for, you dangle the carrot or the hammer, and the only one who really has a hammer is the insurance industry.
Yeah.
And it's going to come down to them.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is trying to do everything we possibly can to maintain the insurance market here within our communities. And hopefully between the collective effort of our neighbors, which is all of us, and the efforts that we're doing with MWPA, Fire Safe Marin, local fire departments, communities, and community members, I believe we can keep the market in California, which will then protect our future assets, and which for most of us is our only true retirement wealth that we have, which is our
True.
properties.
Okay, anyone in the audience have a question? Anyone online have a question about this presentation?
Our Zoom audience members, and there's no public comment.
All right, thank you very much. We will close this presentation. Are you dismissed, or are you around for?
I'll stick around for the next.
All right. That brings us to item 4, which is the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that a council member would like to pull for conversation? No? No? Seeing none? Anyone from the audience want to pull an item from the consent calendar for conversation?
I think for any raised hands from the Zoom audience, if there's no public.
All
comment.
right, seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve consent.
Second.
Second.
Do you need to do a roll call?
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Margulies,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Mayor Way.
Yes. Brings us to item 5, city manager's report.
Just a few things, Madam Mayor. So first, I wanted to note for folks, and it's a good follow-up to the chief's presentation, the Central Marin Fire Council heard a presentation and received a report at its meeting last Thursday. That is the second in a series of studies and analyses that are being conducted to map out a future for fire protection in our community. And the first study, which is also online, looked at the conditions of the 4 firehouses that Central Marin Fire operates out of. This study looked at the operational abilities and areas of the agency with a look toward before we run out and fix 4 fire stations, because they all have challenges physically, let's get a plan together about what's the best operational model. And it talks about other options, including potentially consolidating 2 of the fire stations into 1 station. So these are weighty topics, and the Fire Council is now going to need to reconcile the studies together to plot the next set of analyses and direction to staff. But I want the community to be aware they exist. They're on the Central Marin Fire website. They were in the agenda that was presented. So the easiest way is if you go to the agenda from Thursday, they're all put in one PDF so you can scroll through all the studies at one time. Very, very informative. And this is the start of a conversation with the community. And it's going to definitely be a lengthy conversation as we consider what the future looks like. We have some significant items coming to the council soon, and to the community soon. So I wanted to just make sure that 2 of them are on folks' calendar. One is next week in this chamber, starting at 6 o'clock. There'll be a charrette to discuss the renovation of City Hall, another project that's still in its infancy. The charrette is a precursor to our consulting team producing a historical structure report, which the community and the council need to have an informed conversation about options and costs associated with rehabilitating and reusing City Hall after the library leaves. The charrette is an open house. We would love for folks to come and spend as much time as they can with us, but if your schedule means you can't be there at 6 o'clock, but you could be there at 7, please come by. A charrette is where there's stations throughout the room that are manned by consultants and staff. They'll have information boards, and people have a chance to engage in dialogue with the folks who are studying the building. And then there are questions framed at each station for people to think about. If you can't make it, the stations and the presentation that the consultants put together will all be posted to the website, and comments can be received throughout most of March. So a lot of opportunity for folks to get informed. And then after the historical structure report is produced and published, the council has already stated that you'll hold a meeting to map out a public engagement process that I imagine will go through much of 2025. And then another topic that has generated a lot of interest is whether or not to allow a period of the day in the morning when dogs can be off leash throughout Piper Park. And that'll be coming to the council as part of a joint meeting with the Park and Recreation Commission. And that's scheduled for March 5th. We're not sure if we're going to start at 6 or 6:30 yet, so stay tuned. I'm thinking it'll probably be 6 because there's also some other significant topics on that meeting agenda, including one I know that's near and dear to the mayor's heart, which is to have a public art policy for the city. So please mark your calendar for February 26th, March 5th. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Great. Anything?
Yeah, I had just a couple of announcements that I wanted to make. The first one is that as we pass the resolution to create a climate action forum, Shannon and I have been working to try to engage our community on what days of the week we should meet. We're currently have posted a poll on our website. There was a link to it also in the city manager's newsletter. So we're looking at 2 dates and, 2 days. So it's the first Thursday of the month or the second Wednesday of the month, and we are eager for our community to participate. So please do go to the website and let us know whether or not you're interested in either of those dates. And then the second is I attended the Marin Conservation League's meeting today with their Working Climate Action Group. And there was an announcement about Earth Day and that we will be having our own Earth Day Marin at Mill Valley Community Center. And so I just wanted to make an announcement for it and have everybody mark their calendars for April 23rd. It will be from 2 to 5 p.m. and there'll be a lot of great opportunities to participate in workshops and programs to understand how you can, in your own built environment, decrease and make an impact on reducing your own greenhouse gas emissions in your house. So I have some information here that I can leave for the public, or feel free to reach out to me, and hope to see many of you there. Thanks.
Thank you. Stephanie, anything? Okay. Gabe?
Yeah, just 2 quickies. Given all our discussion of fire, I thought it'd be good to remind people we have a Ready Marin Disaster Fair, and that's going to be March 29th, and that's at the town center around noon. So a lot of these themes of home hardening and defensible space and so forth. Also, I was at the SMART meeting this afternoon. And, basically, right now, the month of January, we saw almost 100,000 riders. So put that in context, a year ago, it's a 35% growth. So the fact that there's increased usage, and headed towards about 1 million a year. You continue to watch that. That's it for me.
Great. And I just had a short item, which was about 2 weeks ago. Myself, the city manager, and the director of public works, Julian Skinner, met with our new supervisor, Brian Colbert, here in the council chambers. A kind of a opportunity to speak and meet with the new supervisor and to discuss some of the issues he brought forward, which was a conversation about flood control in Larkspur and how he can be helpful to us on that matter. He is getting up and running about a lot of different topics. So I think it was a very frank conversation, and I think we're going to continue doing that. So Supervisor Colbert is District 2 supervisor now. So he is the person to reach out to if you have issues that involve the county. All right, so closing this matter, we are on to public hearings, item 7, and there are no public hearings. So that brings us to item 8, our business item, adopt the City of Larkspur's traffic calming. I feel like we have to go calm our meditation. So for those in the chamber, there is a printout. And for those who are not, there is an online presentation that you can review, which is attached to the online agenda. And before you start, Julian, I also want to reference to the community, our meeting that we had in October. I think it was October 14th or 24th. I think it was. There was a presentation on the county local road safety plan, and that document is also available online should there be people in the community who want to see a larger document of all the county issues, and Larkspur specific is in that. And I believe that was was that the October 1st council meeting. So if you go back on our agenda archives, you could find it there. So go ahead, Julian. Enlighten us.
Thank you. Good evening. Julian Skinner, Public Works Director. Tonight for your consideration, we have adoption of a city traffic calming policy. This is a different but similar definition than I provided last time. This one's from the Federal Highway Administration, but it talks about improving corridors for motorists and non-motorists, all users, basically by implementing measures that are aimed to either reduce the amount of traffic or the speed of traffic. So we had a presentation and some community feedback at the November 20th council meeting last year. And this was, we presented some questions for consideration and bringing a traffic calming policy forward to you. And again, what we're looking at, one of the main reasons for having the traffic calming policy is while we've done things on a smaller scale in the past, we haven't done anything based on community feedback that's led to physical improvements on the street, such as speed tables or anything that reduces a street's width. And a lot of that has to do with consensus in some of the areas that we've looked at before. So the goal of this policy is to formalize some of the things we've already been doing at a preliminary level, all the way through to the process that would result in physical traffic calming being implemented in a neighborhood. And so the policy outlines the steps for this. One is the report of a traffic concern by a resident. And then a preliminary investigation by Public Works. And then we have level 1 and level 2 improvements. And then once things are installed, there would also be a review after. So I'll go a little bit further into the detail. Notification typically comes from a resident. And the first thing we would do is determine if this is a traffic calming concern subject to this policy. So sometimes we get requests from somebody has an issue on East Sir Francis Drake. That's not anything that we would address in a traffic calming policy. The document you referenced earlier, the local road safety plan, is a document that looks at those higher speed and streets with more volume, such as Magnolia, East Sir Francis Drake. So traffic calming is typically a concern that somebody has on their local residential street that is to do with there's too much traffic or the traffic is driving too quickly on my street.
So Julian, I think it's important that people understand that what an arterial road is and like you described, and because there are different applications for those, because we get a lot of public comment concerned about some of the roads in which we have limited ability to manage traffic calming measures. Just a quick primer on that, the difference between the arterial and the collector roads.
So there's a hierarchy of streets in the California rating system.
Yes.
Starting with residential. So your basic neighborhood streets,
your block by block.
Those are local streets or residential streets. The next level up from that is called a collector, and there's actually divisions. There's minor collector and major collector, but to simplify things, it goes from a local street to a collector. And a collector is still typically a residential street, but it's one that has more volumes of traffic because a lot of the local streets will feed into it.
Would you call Doherty a collector road or?
Doherty is, yes, it's the high end of the collector. So
Okay.
it's a major collector, whereas William is a minor collector. So it's still, there are other streets in the neighborhood that feed into William. So it's not purely residential. It's considered a collector, but it's a minor.
It has less traffic flow.
Less traffic than
Okay.
Doherty. So it basically goes, local is typically a cul-de-sac would be a local. And then any street that a lot of other streets don't feed into would be a local. And then you get into collectors where you have minors and majors, and that's kind of the division where you start looking at traffic calming or not. And especially once you get past collector, the next division is arterial. And an arterial, you would not do traffic calming on. Those are streets that are busier than collectors. And so they're often multi-lane, but they
Sir
are-
Francis Drake, for
Sir
example.
Francis Drake, and the northern section of Magnolia is technically an arterial.
Yeah.
And the southern section is a collector. And so there are, you know, if there are issues with traffic behaviors on those streets, then you don't typically look at a traffic calming toolbox for those. You look at other issues. And part of that reason is for emergency response and for evacuation routes. You don't want to do anything that would impede the movement of traffic on your busier streets and the streets that you're going to funnel folks to if there's an evacuation.
And those definitions are through California vehicle law or California road law. They're not, so in other words, we don't have a lot of control over implementing
So-
issues into ones that are defined that way.
So the categorization of the streets, there are guidelines for what a street should be categorized,
Yeah.
whether it's local or collector or arterial. There are guidelines based on the volume of traffic that street may see. But ultimately, the city requests to Caltrans what the designation is for a street, whether it's local, collector, or arterial.
I see.
We've done that in the past through traffic surveys and have looked at the volumes and also determined traffic patterns to delineate those. And so it's actually online. Anybody can go online to I think it's called California Street Rating System. If you Google that, it's a Caltrans website, and you can zoom in on any city and they'll show you which streets are local and which are collectors. The other function it does is local streets are typically not eligible for federal funding,
Mhm.
whereas your collectors and arterials, back in the day when there was federal funding for paving streets, those streets would be eligible for federal funding, collectors and arterials, but not local streets.
Thank you, because a lot of people just see a street and a street's a street, but in sort of the protocols that streets are defined differently based on the amount of traffic and where they're going, and we're limited in what we can do depending upon the type of street.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So keep going.
Yeah, because one of the goals is to reducing speed to something that's appropriate is good for any street, regardless
Yeah.
of its classification, but it's the volume thing that gets tricky. You don't want to do something on Magnolia that's going to reduce the amount of volume on Magnolia because it will push people to other streets. So you don't want people getting off of Magnolia because we did traffic calming and slowed everybody down, and now they're all on Monte Vista. So that's one of the reasons Magnolia is a street that you want the traffic to use. So.
Yeah, I think that's helpful because part of what we have to do as public policymakers is balance all of those needs for the use of the street, but not just for individual homeowners and individual drivers, but the pedestrians, the bicyclists, the motorcyclists, and the public safety vehicles that need to have the ability to move quickly through those streets and safely. So, all right, thanks. I won't interrupt you again. I just always think background is helpful.
So this is the next step after we've looked and we've determined that some traffic calming measures would be applicable to this street. Is we look and determine what would an area of influence be. So if it's a cul-de-sac, it's pretty straightforward. The entirety of the cul-de-sac would be the area of influence. But if it's another street that has connector streets or it's a long street and there's multiple blocks, we would want to look at the neighborhood and see what kind of outreach we wanted to do to find out if similar issues were concerns of neighbors. And so we would look at that. We would work together with the applicant, the person that requested we look at traffic calming, and suggest that he finds out if he has at least 6. And we went back and forth, and we had 5 and we had 7. So I went right in the middle. And this would include the applicant. If there's enough people that have a similar concern on what we consider to be the area, then we would move forward and start talking about traffic calming measures. And again, in the past, this is again, some of these preliminary steps we've already done in the past in some neighborhoods. We've just never got the actual physical traffic calming. But there have been neighborhoods where we've actually dealt directly with an HOA, and then they're able to talk to all of the neighbors together in one of their meetings versus the city doing the outreach. So 6 residents or a request from an HOA to look into traffic calming. One of the first things we would do is make sure everybody's got a copy of the policy, so we set expectations, so people know we're not gonna run out and put speed humps in the next day. And then we also work with CMPA. They, with their traffic enforcement, they have data or they have insight, about areas that they know that there's a lot of, maybe they get concerns about speeding, or through stealth boxes or radar trailers that they put out before. They might have some information that would help us determine what the issues are on that street. And so the first thing we would do is if we get through that and we work with CMPA and we say, oh, there looks like something that we could maybe address here on a lower level. Then what we're looking at here is we call them level 1 measures, and we have done this in some neighborhoods before. This is mainly striping and signage. So not any physical changes to the roadway. We're not pinching any curbs in. We're not putting any speed humps or speed tables or anything like that. But we're basically doing something with striping. Can't really see it, but an example would be William. So on William, where we had this issue a few years ago, when we repaved William, what we did was we put narrow striping on the street. So technically the street is not striped wide enough for 2 cars to pass.
Oh, yeah.
So this is meant for the driver when they're driving and they see somebody coming the other way and they realize how narrow the street is, that hopefully they slow down and figure out how they're going to get around one another. So that's a way to do a level 1 measure where you're not physically moving curbs, and it's easy to undo if the neighborhood says, I didn't like that. We did the same thing on Villa La Cumbre. The neighbors after a year said, we don't like it. So the next time we repaved the street, we didn't put the striping back in. So these are things that are relatively low hanging fruit. Signs and striping are low cost in comparison to moving curbs and things like that. And so what we would do is we'd work with that core group of at least 6 people or the HOA, and we would work with our traffic engineer. We work with CMPA and come up with a plan for moving forward with some level 1 improvements. And so when we start looking at level 2 measures, so this is where we start getting into what most people think of when they think of traffic calming, which is speed humps and traffic circles and choker islands and things like that. So we would progress to this if we had done the level 1 measures and they proved to be somewhat successful, but not really, or they thought there was some merit in it, but we wish we could go a step further. Or, it worked at first and then everybody got used to the striping and now everybody's used to that sign and nobody pays attention to it anymore, but we need to do a little something more. So after we've gone through the level 1, we would look at doing level 2, and these are physical changes to the street. And so as we made the presentation in November of last year, we listed the benefits of traffic calming measures, and we also listed the issues people have with traffic calming measures. And there was a number of them. So we really want to make sure that we have a community's buy-in if we're going to move forward with the measures. So we would look at having some public workshops. We would look for about 50% of the neighborhood to be interested. They don't have to commit to, yes, I want to do it, but we want to hear that they're interested in looking at ways to make cars either slow down or have the volume of cars on their street go down. So if we get that roughly 50% interest in a neighborhood, then we'll move forward. We'll do an analysis of what the issue is and what the design guidelines show are improvements specifically to address those issues. So it's not always going to be speed humps, and it's not always going to be a radar feedback sign. Depending on what the nature of the issue is, there will be something in the toolbox that a traffic engineer will recommend will work for that. And then we would make sure that works for public works as far as what we perceive to be the public benefit of the street. And then also work with our emergency service agencies. So make sure that CMPA and that the fire district are okay, and that they're not going to impede either their service or that they have concerns that they may impact evacuations or things like that. So we would work through those agencies, and we would go then back to the neighborhood, and then we would do a formal vote. So we would take with them, this is what the traffic professional has designed to address the issues that have been raised on your street, and we have a design here that has been performed in conformance with all of the California state guidelines. And it's been signed off on by police and Central Marin Fire and Public Works, and look for a formal vote from the neighborhood area. And for this, what we would look for is we'd like to get at least 50% of the neighborhood voting one way or another, and we look for a 60% positive vote. And one of the reasons that it may seem a little bit on the high side, but we want to make sure that, as I did mention, there will be some people that are not in favor of the speed humps going in. We don't want to set the bar too low, because we want to make sure that if the neighborhood decides we don't want those traffic calming measures anymore, we're going to go through the same process to remove them. And so if we set the vote too low to implement them, and it's the same vote to remove them, we're going to go back and forth. So we really want to make sure that we've got a majority of the engaged folks that are supportive of these measures before we move forward with them. And then, like most physical improvements or changes that we would do to a public street, we would bring that to actually get formal council approval before we would implement the measures. And then, like a lot of things we do, we don't just install them and walk away. We like to go back and hear from the residents and see if they're working. Maybe they need to be tweaked, maybe they need to be relocated slightly, or signs need to be added, but we would like to go through a process. And this is typically about a year where you leave these measures in place and you get the community feedback. And then we would come back to council and we would give you an update on any of these that have been installed and let you know. We'll have before and after speeds and volumes if that's what the concern was. Now, that doesn't mean if something comes up and turns out that it's a horrible installation, we won't go and remove it right away. If it turns out that in practice, it doesn't work as well as in paper and it's actually a safety hazard, then we'll just go and remove it, and we'll let everybody know that we had to remove it for some concern. A couple of considerations. We don't know how many of these neighborhoods. There's at least a half a dozen neighborhoods in town that have contacted me over time, and we've gone through level one. I don't know how many are going to come forward and want to go to the next steps. So one of the things that we had chatted about was whether this should be public funded or private funded by the neighborhood. So what we're going to do as these first few roll through, and we haven't had the conversation, which I expect we will as part of our budget process this year, is whether we should have a set aside for some of these traffic calming improvements. But we will be asking these folks when they vote on whether they want the level twos or not, whether that neighborhood will fund them if there's no city council funding. And that way they can get into the queue. Because we may get more requests, even if the council decides to set aside some public funds for these, you may get more requests and more approvals from Public Works and Fire than you're able to process in a calendar year. So, if there are folks out there and we think it's approvable and they're willing to pay for it, that neighborhood themselves, then we want to make sure that they're able to go through that process. But that will be part of when we bring a neighborhood to you. There will be a discussion of whether you would like to fund it out of city funds or either in whole or in part. And then again, the policy doesn't have any specific applications in it. It's not showing speed humps. It's not showing traffic circles. With all of those are in our toolbox, and as some of those guidelines are updated, we want to capture what some of the new technologies may be that other cities have installed and have been approved that we didn't really want to cement those in the policy. So we'll work with our traffic consultant and bring forward to you, if these come to council, what we feel is the most appropriate measure for that particular street. Sometimes it might be a traffic circle, sometimes it might be a cushion, but it'll be site specific and neighborhood specific in conformance with all of the state guidelines. And I think that's it. And so this is an action item. There is a resolution that's included for you to consider to adopt the policy. So I'm available for any questions.
Great. And anything else to add from staffs? Okay. Questions?
Yeah, just Julian, I believe this policy was somewhat adapted from San Anselmo and Mill Valley.
Yeah, the structure of it and the process of getting community buy-in and then working with the neighborhood and have the neighborhood be the lead in the process and then requiring a formal vote is pretty much the structure of both San Anselmo and Mill Valley. Yeah.
And so my question is, you know, just their experience with this, like as far as, you know, burden on staff, also outcome, like our, you know, we see area around Miller Avenue and, has had this brought, worked through this process and it's been resolved or not resolved, et cetera.
So my feedback from speaking with staff from Mill Valley and San Anselmo is they've both taken this policy and they've used it as a guideline, but they've wandered out. They've used it more of a guideline than a strict cast in stone. And they've adapted it to situations in neighborhoods where it didn't quite fit the mold. Mill Valley has not done as many on the residential scale. San Anselmo went a little bit looser and as a pilot program actually installed a couple of different speed humps in some neighborhoods. And the feedback I got from them was once they loosened up the requirement a little bit and shrunk some of the areas so that some of the voting met the threshold, that they have a pretty significant backlog of neighborhoods that they need to go look at traffic calming. So.
And just one last question. I mean, we, since we have our Central and Fire staff, I mean, one of the, key things is does this, like speed humps and whatnot, how, I know that was part of your flow diagram, but, what would be sort of a rule of thumb of where you can't adopt measures because, it gets in the way of service vehicles?
Well, I'll leave that up to each of the service agencies to tell me what their go-no is or go-no-go for their recommendation. But I do know that there are fire agencies and police agencies out there that have worked with other city departments and have come up with a compromise layout, such as the speed cushions that are basically the long speed humps, and they have the gaps in them to make sure there's room for a fire truck to go through without having to go over a hump or an ambulance. So I can't speak to what their thresholds would be. But I know that other agencies have worked through those issues in other.
But they're included in the analysis. So in the policy, definitely included.
Yeah.
Okay.
No question. And Stephanie, any question?
Yeah, I have two questions. First of all, I really like this policy. I think at least it provides a framework for neighborhoods, our residents, and city council to consider, implementation of traffic calming solutions. So I do like it. I have two questions. One is, how are you going to define neighborhood in terms of the residents who are voting? Because obviously, as you point out, people on one street may want one thing, and the people on the neighboring street where all the traffic might get diverted to may vote differently. And so what is the definition of neighborhood when we're trying to get a vote on the traffic calming, level 2 traffic calming measure? And then secondly, maybe, and this will be for our budget discussions, but I would be interested in how much San Anselmo or Mill Valley or some of the neighboring jurisdictions, how much how much they spent actually in implementing level 2 type of measures. I'd be interested in seeing or understanding what that number is before we have to discuss the budget item.
So how is neighborhood defined?
So neighborhood is a little fluid, and so it's going to depend on the nature of the issue, the configuration of the street, and the neighboring streets also. So starting with the easiest example, if it's a cul-de-sac, it's a dead-end street, it's going to be that street. In a typical city layout, a lot of these neighborhoods are defined as the blocks. It's basically intersection to intersection, but we don't have a lot of neighborhoods that are like that. But for example, a block of Monte Vista that's parallel to
Magnolia.
Magnolia could be considered a neighborhood because it's connected kind of in a grid-like fashion with Magnolia. So you could have an implementation on a block of Monte Vista that the next block maybe is not going to care about. If they don't like it, they'll drive up to Magnolia. But it's really going to depend, and that's something we'll work with the traffic consultant on, because knowing the nature of what the problem is, whether it's speeding or whether it's cut through traffic, he'll be able to look at the layout of the streets, and we know what the volumes are of the streets, and he'll be able to identify what the impact would be of the traffic calming measures that we would look at to address those. I would say rule of thumb, it's going to be around a block or so. But again, we don't have a whole lot of those, standard blocks, but and again, when you get to your busier streets, you wouldn't implement it anyway, because that's where you want the cars. So for the most part, these are going to be on your more locally roads, and it's going to be a little bit more intuitive.
And then the second question about the budget, we
Oh,
can't really answer tonight because that'll come later.
So I can get the information from San Anselmo on how much they've spent. I know their council did do a set aside. I think I know what the number is, but I don't want to misquote it. So
Okay.
I'll get that information for you, and we can provide that as part of the conversation that we have.
That's
Is there
great.
something you
Thank
wanted to add to that?
Well, I did want to note, because Julian and I've talked about this policy quite a bit. I think it's important when we use this definition of neighborhood, I think we'll be wanting to make sure that the folks who are submitting their name in favor of it are people who have to live with the negative aspects of traffic calming.
True.
For example, if the speed table or speed hump is put right in front of your house, that's different than having it up the block. And I think it's important that there be representation of support from the people who are actually right around this infrastructure. So I think we would tightly define neighborhood that way. And I want to signal to folks, it's going to be challenging when we do certain streets. Via La Cumbre is going to be very difficult, because if you live at the bottom of Via La Cumbre, you feel very strongly about certain issues. And if you live at the top, you feel very strongly about different issues.
Right.
And they may be in conflict with one another. So we'll have to work with the community to focus on some common ground and definition of neighborhood.
Okay, before we take public comment, the ask is for resolution 0925, and the traffic calming policy is about 5 pages in here, but it says draft. Does that matter?
We'll strip draft when you
Okay,
adopt
it says February 19th, 2025 draft, and if we just remove draft, okay. But before we do that, is there anyone, any other questions? We'll go to public comment. Anyone in the audience in the chambers like to make a public comment about this? Ask a question? All right, seeing none, we'll go to our Zoom audience, and I see one hand raised. Allison, would you facilitate that person? Please identify yourself.
James Holmes, Larkspur.
Welcome, Mr. Holmes.
Okay, physical traffic changes, of course, can be very controversial. I mean, some council members may remember that even a traffic sign on East Ward took about 3 meetings. And of course, there is continuing controversy in San Francisco about various traffic. So the proposed policy very wisely stipulates that traffic calming installation should be, quote, subject to consensus resident support, unquote. Unfortunately, I would question whether that intent is carried forward in the specifics of ascertaining the amount of support. Because if I understand it correctly, it is 60% of a 50% voter turnout. Well, 60% of 50% is not, or may not even be a majority, let alone a consensus. I would argue that for a level 2 physical traffic change, the proponent should have to get at least a majority of the actual units in the neighborhood. I mean, that could be a single house or two, or but in any event, the of the units in the neighborhood, the separate units. I mean, it makes residents, of course, come and go, but the traffic changes tend to stay, and the unit number tends to stay. I mean, I think it should be 60% of the units. Frankly, I think that would be approaching a true consensus. But having at least 50% of the residential units would seem to be a bare minimum to approach the idea of a consensus. And to avoid a great deal of controversy or undue influence by a relatively small group of residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So he's referring to, in the document, the last page about the voting to receive at least 50% of property owners within the area. And at least 60%, that's.
But I do think it's important to remember that reaching those thresholds is what then requires analysis and expenditure of public resources by the staff to study the issue and provide a final recommendation and report. And ultimately, the council at a council meeting would have to approve the installation. So there'd be numerous opportunities along the way if people felt there wasn't consensus and that something was being forced upon the neighborhood. There'd be multiple opportunities before the installation would occur for people to voice their concern.
I think though he did bring up something interesting because we do indicate property owners, and what does that do then for a neighborhood that has mostly renters? That would not qualify as a property owner, but we have 52% of our community lives in rental. I just wonder how we could, if that's possible, to think of how we include residents who are not property owners.
So, we have the ability to send notices to owner and resident. And so in this case, when we're doing the vote, it doesn't really speak to it, but we could, when we generate the mailings, it will by default send a mailing to both the current resident and the property owner. And that's how all of our notices for all of our public items go out. So we could do that and see if we get multiple. I wouldn't count 2 votes. If there's a renter and an owner of a property, I wouldn't count that as 2 votes, but I would probably take either one. And then I guess if they're conflicting, then the policy does say owner, but I would take the resident's vote. If we quite often don't get responses when we put out surveys to non-resident owners. So I think, we can say in the absence of the owner's vote, we would take the current resident's vote.
Yeah, I'm just trying to reconcile it with so many neighborhoods that do have multiple family dwellings in them.
Yeah, I do think though, if we really focus on that thought for a moment, there's only going to be a handful of streets in the city that this policy potentially applies to that involve significant numbers of multifamily units, because the most significant one, South Alicia, has already had traffic calming installed all along the length of it. So, there'd be a few on the hillsides there that potentially the policy could apply to, but I think we probably could wait and see. I mean, I think if you had a bunch of renters coming to the city and asking for something, we wouldn't turn them away. We just might not use this policy. We might have to have an engagement with them directly.
Yeah, I think it's important to maybe just bookmark that, and that we can always revisit policies if that becomes a concern, because we may have not recognized all the different residential relationships that are there. So
I also want to emphasize, I don't want people to think adopting this policy is intended to end the many other avenues that people have to request something like traffic calming. This is to essentially, it's the council empowering neighborhoods, and we mostly get concerns on this issue from single family homeowners. It's empowering those single family homeowners to know how they can trigger a process.
Yeah.
And there are many other ways to trigger similar processes. So I think if a a lot of renters showed up at Public Works office, at my office, at a council meeting, and so we have a real problem. We wouldn't ignore that.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just want to make sure we're covering, we're being inclusive to all the different community members. And I mean, we have had residents from several of our mobile home parks express concern about traffic issues near them, and traffic calming measures may be applicable there. So I hear Mr. Holmes wanting to make sure we involve people who may not be property owners. So I would bookmark that we can maybe review that as this policy gets implemented and reviewed, if that becomes necessary to do. So, are there any other questions online? I don't see any, and none from the council, so we'll close this matter. So before us, we have the staff recommendation is to adopt the resolution 0925, the City of Larkspur traffic calming policy. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll move to pass that.
I'll second.
All right, Allison?
Councilmember Andre,
Yes.
Councilmember Margulies,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson.
Yes.
Mayor Way.
Yes. Wonderful. So that brings us to item 9, which is adjournment. And thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our staff and our extra staff. Our next meeting is March 5th. But before that, next Wednesday, as was mentioned in this room, is the workshop, the charrette about the renovation opportunities or the future of the City Hall building in which we're inhabiting. So that's at 6 o'clock. And everyone is welcome to attend. And if you cannot attend, there will be opportunities to comment online. Thank you very much and good night.